projects that have reached national prominence very recently, and I think that that will make you feel so proud. So, let's see. Montana State University is home to the first satellite that was designed, built, and operated by MSU students. So this is a project that has involved 125 students over the course of 5 years. Since the summer of 2006, the satellite will be studying radiation belts. It will accomplish that by emitting some heartbeat signals every 15 seconds. It is named after former department head William Hiscock, and last October, our students went to NASA and bolted this to a NASA rocket, and this is what happened.
3, 2, main engine start, 1, 0, and liftoff of the Delta II with the NPP satellite, blazing the way a new technology for climate research and weather forecasting.
So, you know, I think that now I can truly say that MSU has a satellite campus. And I think that this gives new meaning to the term distance education. And I would like to recognize at this moment the wonderful individuals who made this happen. With us this morning, we have some students. Clint C.J. Hadwin, a senior in electrical engineering. Lori Smoot, a senior in electrical engineering as well. Faculty from MSGC, Dr. Angela Desjardins from the Department of Physics, and Dr. David Klumper from the Department of Physics. Congratulations. I'm also very proud because MSU is home to Engineers Without Borders. And what a program this is. Over the last 7 years, more than 80 students have participated in this project that consisted on designing and building wells that will bring fresh potable waters to schools in the town of Kiwasero in Kenya. And I think that this is absolutely amazing in so many ways. We have engineers working in this project, but it has literally crossed those boundaries. Now we have students from nursing, from education, from business, from philosophy. All of them want to be involved in this wonderful opportunity. These students, I think the other wonderful thing is that they have demonstrated commitment over time. So even when many of them have graduated, you have extraordinary accomplishments over 7 years. And these students not only have dedicated many hours to this project, but they have raised the funds for each of these wells. So what started with just one well, now they have built over 61 wells in Kenya, raising over $500,000 to make that possible. So, as you know very well, this project was showcased in a competition that won the Regional Kellogg Award, and I'll tell you about what happened at the national competition, but this is what we are going to be sharing with people based on the 2-minute video that we needed to show in our competition.
The people of Kiwasero, Kenya, asked our student group to join them in bringing clean water to their schools. We are the Montana State University chapter of Engineers Without Borders. We use what we learn in our own classrooms to cross boundaries and create solutions. At Montana State University, we work together. We change lives.
So that was the award that actually the project that last Monday was selected in a fierce competition And the 4 finalists were University of Tennessee, Knoxville, that has 27,000 students, Michigan State University, that has 39,000 students, Penn State University, that has 45,000 students and 95,000 students in the system, and the winner of the Peter McGraw Community Engagement Award was Montana State University, and it's 14,153 students. And with us here today, we have Jeff MUS, who's the current president of Engineers Without Borders, a junior in civil engineering, majoring in bioresources engineering. Kathy Reeder, a senior in film and photography, motion picture and video, and Katie was the student that actually produced the winning video, and Kira McNeely, who's a junior in chemical engineering, Joe Thiel, our very own student regent, and from the faculty, who also mentored our students, Dr. Otto Stein from civil engineering, and Dr. Leah Schmalzbauer from sociology and anthropology. Congratulations. This is one of those awards. The award was absolutely wonderful, but just knowing the difference that these students are making in those communities is absolutely impressive. So I warned everybody that after that award, I was going to be absolutely impossible to live with. So I think that I'm going to honor that. MSU also is home to the women's rodeo team, who actually won the 2011 College Nationals Rodeo Championship. And there were 137 contestants in the National Intercollegiate Rodeo Association. The girls from Montana State University won the first place by 130 points over the second place. Now, there are some things that you need to know about that as well. And that is the National Championships Women's Rodeo team has a 3.29 GPA for spring 2011. Rodeo has a combined graduation rate of 69%, which is well above the graduation rate of MSU, which stands at this moment at 50.8. On the Women's National Championship team, of the 20 students, 19 are from Montana. And overall, 86% of our rodeo team is from Montana. So with us today, I'm very happy to recognize, actually it's here, Dani Doughton is a sophomore from Elis, Idaho. She's majoring in ag education and public relations. Dani is the defending Big Sky Regional Champion breakaway roper. Lexi Rienda from Kalispell, Montana is a senior in equine science and a 2-time regional champion and top 8 finisher in the goat tying. Robbie Nace from Roundup, Montana is a senior in history and secondary social studies education. Robbie is the 2011 Reserve National Champion Barrel Racer. And Kate Sharon from Dillon graduated last spring with a degree in organismal biology and is currently serving as a graduate assistant coach for our women's team while she works on a master's degree in the School of Animal and Range Science. Kate is the 2011 national champion in the goat tying, which is MSU's first individual national champion since mid-1990s, and with them this morning is our wonderful coach, Mike True. Congratulations. And finally, MSU is also home to the 111th Brawl of the Wild. I'm sure that by now you know that we are hosting the #1 team in the nation. It was recognized in the national polls this last Monday. Actually, the announcement came exactly 5 minutes after the announcement of the Peter McGraw Award, so we were on a roll. Now, you know about the extraordinary record in games this year, but perhaps you don't know this about our football team, and that is in the spring of 2011, 33% of our football players had earned a cumulative GPA above 3.0. 42% of our football players earned above a 3.0 GPA for the term. 4 football students, athletes made the president's list, and 10 made the dean's list. And the most recent 4-year average APR is 943, which is the highest in MSU's history and represents an increase of 37 points from just 3 years ago. We are also proud to say that in our football team, we have an All-American in Tanner Bleskin. Our students also have devoted more than 700 hours to community service. And in the photo to the right, we have Big Zach Minter, as we call him, with little Zach, who's a little Bobcat fan from Great Falls, Montana. So I'm honored to introduce to you this morning Alex Terrian, who's a senior in business and accounting. Zach Minter, who's a sophomore in family and consumer science. Joel Fuller, who's a sophomore in pre-business and management. Also our wonderful coach, Rob Ash, who has made this transformation possible, and our spectacular AD, Peter Fields. Thanks for making us feel so proud. So with that, I just need to say, welcome to your university, Montana State. We are delighted to have you here.
Thank you, President Cruzado, and thank you for all those presentations. Good stuff going on at Montana State University. It's a pleasure to hear a little bit more about those. Thank you and congratulations. I think the next thing we need to do is entertain a motion to approve the minutes as posted.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman, I'd
Regent
like
Barrett?
to note a small correction. There was a little wording difference when there was that report on the 2-year colleges on exactly which institutions were providing which services. John Seck noted those slight differentiations to me. We provided that to Lynette, and she's going to amend the minutes accordingly.
Okay. Any objection to the amendments? Okay. Then we have a motion to approve the minutes as posted in the agenda with the corrections as noted by Regent Barrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? The minutes are approved. We need to take a minute and go through some introductions. Campuses have introductions they want to make? No? Nothing's new?
Introductions and announcements?
Well, we're going to have some announcements
Okay.
too. I know we have a couple announcements starting, I think, with President Engstrom. I'd like to say a few words. I believe this will be Bill Muse's last meeting with us. President Engstrom.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I want us to just take a moment to thank and give a send-off to Bill Muse, our Associate Vice President for Administration and Finance. Bill and his wife Mary will be moving back to Texas. They conveniently found a great job 2 miles away from their retirement home lot in Texas, and so it's returning home for them. But Bill has been a tremendous asset, not only to the University of Montana in Missoula, but the entire University of Montana affiliation and the Montana University system. So I would just ask Bill if he would just stand and let us thank him for his years of outstanding service to the Montana University system.
Thank you, President Engstrom. And I know he mentioned it, but on behalf of the board, I'd like to say Bill has been a very active participant at a system level with all the work that we've done in the last few years. And we greatly appreciate all your efforts, even beyond your job descriptions. Thank you, Bill. And I believe that we have an announcement for President Cruzado.
Yes, Chairman Christian, members of the board, I have a bittersweet announcement, and that is our wonderful Dean of Montana State University College of Technology in Great Falls, Dr. Joe Schaefer, has accepted the position of president at Laramie County Community College, and we will wish him the very best. We are extremely sad to see him go, but we know how talented he is and that he will do a wonderful job for that institution. So congratulations, Joe.
President Cruzado.
And also adding to the MSU family, it's my intention at the next Board of Regents to bring to the consideration of this board the appointment of Dr. Jim Limbo as Chancellor of Montana State University Northern. Dr. Limbo will be joining us from University of Texas St. Angelo, and he and his wife Trish will be joining us on January the 1st, pending approval from the Board of Regents. I would also like to take advantage of this opportunity to thank once again Dr. Joe Callahan for his extraordinary service to not only MSU Northern but for the entire university system in Montana. Thank you, Joe.
Commissioner Stearns?
I have an introduction. I would like, as one who often has a spouse accompany her to these meetings, and in my case, nobody wonders who that character is. By now, everyone knows who he is. But I would like, because, Paul, we really welcome you to the family, but we also welcome your wife, Pam Hillary, who's here, and I'd like everyone to know that Pam is here and make sure she's introduced. Pam, stand up so everyone knows. Thank you for coming, Pam. I understand that, Don, that is Vicki here also? Vicki Blackadder? Vicki, we would like to meet you. There, thank you. Welcome.
Any other introductions or announcements? Okay. And we will try to move on to our agenda. I'd like to remind everybody that, of course, we're streaming this meeting again through the help of Montana PBS and KUSM. Michael Ballard's group is here. If nothing else, we know Lynn Hamilton's watching. So we say hello to her and Mary Moe and a few other from our past. And I would like to remind everybody, it is true, the camera adds at least 45 pounds. So that rumor's actual. Let's start into the agenda. I'd like to just start with a few comments. The Commissioner and I had the pleasure of attending WICHE meeting a couple weeks ago, and I always like to just make a few comments after those meetings to bring some of that, what ends up being a 15-state sort of regional news and direction back to us. I guess I left this meeting thinking I was sure glad to be from Montana. We faced challenges, and that's for certain, but I left there knowing we have a pretty darn well-run state, fiscally and otherwise, and we have an extremely well-run system. I appreciate the Commissioner's office and all the work that they do under Commissioner Stearns' direction. It's we're in good shape, and I was amazed as we went through the presentations how progressive we really are, and most of what was talked about is things that we've talked about in Montana for quite a while. They had several different plenary sessions, started with a fairly large one, many states going through the kind of reorganization that really we tackled back in the 90s, working hard to include K through 12, which I think we're already doing a lot of. A lot of things going through legislative process to remove boards and add boards, and I think we've got a lot of stability in that range. I also think the interesting piece of it is they're all trying to find a way to become more of a system from the P20 concept, and I think that's something that we've long embraced. I think as we hire new presidents, it was very important to us that we continue that effort to become a system, and as we look for a commissioner, I think on the forefront of that decision is how do we become more a system. So I think all the states in the Western region are realizing that's an important component. We can't be all things to all people, and working as a system is the only way to achieve efficiency. So I think we're really making some strides there. It was interesting to hear how the other states are battling with that at this time. Was a plenary session on data. Again, I think a lot of the things that we discussed in our dashboard indicators, much of what Tyler's been working on for years is new territory for many of the states. And the real surprising one to me is Dennis Jones was there, an old friend of ours that was new territory for a lot of states. A lot of states working on the same type of things we are. One of the things I thought was interesting with it is as much as everyone continues to think a lot of what Dennis has to say and a lot of that concept has merit, it still struggles, I think, state to state to figure out how we're going to implement those things. And I think a lot of it comes back to discussion that Regent Buchanan has often championed is maybe the answer is the prioritization. I think many of you were there, but we had a great attendance and discussion a few weeks ago, well, maybe a month or so ago now in Missoula with Bob Dickinson talking about prioritization. And I think that's going to have to be a piece of it as everybody grapples with budget concerns. We're on the right track there. We've got good conversations going. I'm anxious to see us as a board and us as a system move some of those forward to try to get to some end goals. But that's what's going on across the WICHE system, and it was interesting to both listen and both feel proud that we've got a system that's well ahead of the game on many of the topics that everyone's embracing and looking at other states and how they're doing and how they're succeeding, and I think we will continue to make progress in that direction. The other thing I would mention in my comments, I guess, is a few times as I've walked across our system in the last 5 or 6 years, I've stumbled across some things that I thought were truly unique events that Montana has the ability to participate in, and I know they happen at every campus across the system. I happen to live in Missoula, so I was at the one there, but the Grateful Nation project that this board approved a few years back or 18 months back was really an incredible day on campus, and I think it was good work done by this board. It's the first of its kind in the country. Partnerships between military and universities have been few and far between. I think this board showed the courage to move that project forward under President Dennison, and one thing David Bell, who brought the project forward, commented a number of times in the various meetings was they were very concerned when the president transition happened that George Dennison, who sort of started the effort, would go by the wayside, and so would the project, and they were extremely complimentary that President Engstrom picked that up and moved it forward, and just an absolute amazing event. One of those things where, you know, we had President Dennison, President Engstrom, Senator Baucus, Brigadier General out of the military. I mean, various speakers. When they left there was very few dry eyes in the place. It was an incredibly moving event, and it's nice to see that our universities are not only educating students, but trying to do good things in many walks of life. This is a project that will help children from deceased military, active military persons in the Afghan and Iraq wars. Montana has the highest casualty rate of any state in the nation per capita, which is an amazing number, but there was 40-some families there that represented lost lives, and a commitment by a grateful nation to see that children of those families will get educated and get the guidance and the counsel they need to get a college degree. So good work by the system. With that, I think we can move on to the next part of our agenda, which is some comments from Commissioner Stearns.
Thank you very much, and I concur with my congratulations to the board and to President Engstrom for the outstanding Grateful Nation and other celebrations. On another note, in terms of special celebrations on a much smaller level, I received a message, I think a couple of days ago, from Michael Dills, and I doubt Michael is in the room. He's a student here at MSU. And he was a student lobbyist whom we got to know, and that's one of the real pleasures in my job as commissioner, is to work with and get to know student interns and student lobbyists during legislative session. And I hadn't heard from Michael for quite some time, so I opened the email, and he said, we're having a celebration on November 17th of Beaujolais Day, the celebration of the fall harvest here on the MSU campus. And I thought, who knew that November 17th was Beaujolais Day, or that it was, would be celebrated? So I don't know if Michael's here, but it's an example of, you know, students pulling together and having a, not just all in fun, it celebrates things that they're working on. And I did forward it to our friend Dan Villa, our colleague who's not here today, because it's very likely that Dan and Brandy are having a new baby today. So I needed for him to know that that baby was being born on Beaujolais Day. He was quite interested to hear that and said he would keep us posted if the new babe arrives as the day goes on. And I know we all wish him well if he happens to be. I hope he's not paying any attention to us, but in case he is. I would like to move kind of into the listening session themes, if I may, just moving on the agenda then, Mr. Chair. The listening sessions, I have to start with thank yous to all of you regents who participated in one or more of those, and to the host campuses and communities. They were particularly interesting this year. We had a great many responses, both in terms of comments in those meetings as well as written comments, and so I'll do a quick summary of those. And I think some of you will maybe lament, but others of you will cheer that I'm not going to put up a PowerPoint. I'm just going to tell you what those themes were, and to me they count as a theme if I heard it more than 3 times in at least 2 or more communities. So here are the themes that I heard, and those of you regents who, and college and university presidents and chancellors and deans, if I missed something that you thought was particularly important, please remind me. I heard that our outreach to communities is valued and respected, but the more we do, the more we can do, the more they like it. The first listening session was in Sydney, and I would say, Butte, you just have to understand, every now and then you get outdone. That the most urgency and passion came in Sydney, Montana. And you might understand why. They are economically prosperous, but they are desperate for this help of the state in all kinds of ways. But particularly, they were focused that morning on the kind of educational outreach that will help that community adapt very rapidly, and they know that we have all kinds of experts and classes in all of our colleges and universities that could be helping them with that. So I will bring that up again tomorrow in Regent Barrett's committee, a recommendation, at least the beginnings of a recommendation, to elevate a work group to really high priority task force status that will help the Sydney area and the whole, all of eastern Montana with our areas of expertise in higher education. Secondly, I heard a lot about research, the appreciation for ag research, for the extension services, but also in all of the colleges and universities, including the 2-year colleges, kind of an affirmation of members of the board of what we heard this morning, and that is the appreciation that students and faculty have for the ability at the college level to be part of creating knowledge and hands-on experiential knowledge, and that it's not just reserved for PhD granting institutions. They wanted to remind us of that and for us to encourage and reward faculty and students who are engaged in that at every college and university across the state. Saw good examples, heard great appreciation. I heard several times about students, special outreach to students. A thank you, for example, from the MSU Northern folks about serving and working with veteran students. And I know that many of our campuses are doing that, and I heard it several places, so it definitely counted as a theme. So campus leaders, to the extent I know that you're doing that, I thank you, and I convey to you that it's appreciated and valued and much sought after by people in communities. I heard about efficiency, about Common Course numbering. They continue, members of the communities out there, to think that is a great idea. A member of the administrative team at Montana Tech reminded us it needs, like anything else, to be evaluated to make sure that it is kept robust and up to date and is really achieving what it is set out to do. But for the most part, the theme was transferability. Our colleagues at Chief Dullknife College said, and that was one of my favorite listening sessions, I think that they had, per capita, the highest sort of percentage of participation of folks there. And the pride at Chief Dullknife College would just blow you away. It did me. It reminded me. And one of the things they talked about is how much they appreciate being part of transferability and Common Course numbering. And they opted in. Not everybody was thrilled to be part of Common Course numbering. That's a bit of an understatement. I don't even see any smiles, maybe one or two. But they were delighted to be part of it. And they said it has really made them more attractive. They use it as a marketing tool, that so many of their classes are clearly now identified by name and number with those in the university system. I heard about dual enrollment and alignment with K-12. It was, to a certain extent, an atta-boy, atta-girl, keep it up. We know you're beginning that, they said, in the university system. You're not up with other states yet, but we know you have made great strides in extending and offering dual enrollment. A lot of them did not know yet the action you took, members of the board, in terms of making the cost of dual enrollment for students a more predictable and even aspect of dual enrollment for schools and students. So that was a good opportunity to communicate that. A lot of support for College Now and support for what businesses need in the workforce, and comments, specific ones in the trades, whether it was from pipe fitters in the Colstrip area in eastern Montana to healthcare needs in the Northwest. And finally, faculty came out to almost all of the listening sessions, spoke very, very respectfully but eloquently about their needs, about the needs of their families, about the recognition of what they do. I think they think we value them, but they want to be sure. And they were, it was very, frankly, moving to hear from many of them, and they gave specific examples of attention, of items that our staff can work on and bring to your attention to serve those who are most directly the faculty and staff serving our students. College Now, a lot of people know about it now, that we are really elevating two-year and community college education, that we are making it much more respectable and not a sort of default choice for students, or whether straight out of high school or dual enrollment or adult students. So I think our work, I heard there, is on a good track, but I also heard there's still a lot more of that story to tell. And I guess I would conclude by quoting someone, I think it was in Dillon, who said to me, you know, the Montana University system has a great story to tell, but about its contribution to the Montana economy. You've got to keep telling that story. You've got to keep conveying that through your meetings, through everything you do. So those were the themes that I heard, and that we are incorporating into what we will draft for your options, members of the board, as you think about your legislative and policy priorities for the governor's budget, for the legislature, and for the people of the state of Montana.
Thank you, Commissioner Stearns. Regent Buchanan.
I think it's important to add one more theme that we certainly heard repeatedly. I was a part of 3 of them, and the process that we took at each of the sessions was to ask Sheila to leave for a moment so that we could solicit some input on this commissioner search. And I think it's extremely important to note that without fail, everybody that was participating just flowed over the top with enthusiasm about the job that you've done, Sheila, and the leadership that you've provided, not only to us and the board and the system, but clearly in the communities where these folks came out in droves to express their appreciation for your leadership. And I don't know that you were privy to hear a lot of those, but we certainly were and heard a ton of them. So,
Thank you.
Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing that I wanted to mention too was, as Sheila had mentioned, that the faculty came out and spoke very openly about wanting to not only be a part of that message that goes to the legislature, but that they're willing to participate in this process as well. It wasn't just expecting the regents to do all of the work or the commissioner's office to do all of the work, but I was very impressed with some of the faculty representatives bringing their ideas to the table, and I think that really shows that we're all in this together, and the more that you're willing to bring your ideas and your participation, it certainly helps us in the message that we're bringing to the legislature in order to receive adequate funding in the future. So I just wanted to acknowledge their participation and their desire to have that communication early on in the process.
Thank you, Regent Robinson. Any other comments? I believe we can go to strategic plan. Is that Mr. Two Names? Mr. Trevor?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, good morning. Today we have a quick update on enrollment. It's kind of combined with our traditional, I would say now, look at dashboard indicators. We decided to go with enrollment this time, given the fact that it's the November board meeting and a lot of attention paid to enrollment trends at our campuses. Before I dive into the presentation, I just remind you of the other dashboard indicators that we've completed to this point, trying to build a full picture basically of student success, workforce development, efficiency in the system. So we started with college participation a year ago, moved to retention, financial aid, affordability, which we'll talk about a little bit more today, and then the ever-popular completion productivity at the last meeting. I had intended to come with something maybe a little bit more sophisticated than just enrollment, but after taking a look at some of our enrollment trends, I think that you'll find every bit as interesting the nuggets of information in comparing just from one year to the next our enrollment in the system. So with that, Summer, if you could pull up that presentation. So I basically have stood here for the last 4 years and said, this is the highest enrollment in the Montana University system's history. And I have a big red sign across the top of that. I took that sign off, but it doesn't mean it's not true, because this is the highest enrollment in the Montana University system history. It's just not that spectacular in relation to what it was last year. We went on a pace there of 5%, 6% increase. You go back from 07 to 8, it was like a 3% increase. This year, it's a 0.3% increase. So what I guess the soundbite here is the highest enrollment in Montana University system history, yes, and sustained growth. We sustained our growth. We pretty much hit our peak, and we sustained it. As we all know, a lot of this is related to the recession. So it's important to look at this, and that's why I led with this slide in a 10-year picture here. Take a look from 01 to 06. We increased about 1,500 FTE. If you go from 06 to 2011 to this date, it's 5,000 FTE. So I think it's important to keep that in perspective as we move along throughout this presentation. Go ahead, Summer. Okay, so for every semester we look at first student FTE. And I stand up here and just quickly throw out student FTE, like everybody should know exactly what that is. And it's not complex. It's just a full-time equivalent measure of enrollment. An undergraduate student taking 15 credits is 1 FTE. 15 undergraduate students taking 1 credit is 1 FTE. So however you get to that 15 credits, you count it once. That's the full-time equivalent student enrollment. And as you can see, the bottom line there is we went up 123 FTE overall. The devil is definitely in the details throughout this enrollment presentation. You go up to the top line, resident undergraduates, we went down 223. And that's where I kind of got off on using this as a dashboard indicator, because as we move throughout, and we actually have some detail here that will go along with campus panel presentations today in taking a look at just headcount enrollment and what happened to our first-time freshmen. Because that's a big trend and a big important issue in the state of Montana are the number of high school students coming out, graduating each year. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself there, but that's where it really gets interesting. So we look at resident graduate students, basically flat. Non-resident undergraduates went up 228. That's about what we've been doing per year. Non-resident stayed about the same. WUI, the Western Undergraduate Exchange, it's another variety of non-resident undergraduate, but what we give a little bit of a tuition break to. And then non-resident graduates, which increased as well. Okay, Summer, roll us one. I've gone backwards in technology here from using PowerPoint to PDFs. Okay, then taking the next kind of slice at it, we compare the enrollment of our doctoral research universities combined, which are U of M and MSU, and you can see that's where any growth we had in the system occurred. In fact, it's, as you'll see when we get to the individual campuses, it's at one of those campuses, basically. So there's 313 new FTE there. Our 4-year or regional campuses, the bachelor and master's degree campuses, basically flat, minus 85. And we had the 2-year. There's a lot of trends inside that 2-year. A lot of differences between the campuses, I should say. But that's a negative 105. And you really got to keep that in perspective because of the fact of the accelerated growth. People say, well, how has 2-year done over the last 10 years? Well, it's doubled in the state of Montana. So a negative 105, not too big of a deal, particularly when there's 8 different campuses inside of that. Okay, roll us up one more. All right, we get into the by campus. I'm going to have a lot of information for you by campus today, but not talk about it, but more have it on the screen as we do our campus panel talks. But you can see that there's, if you look at the percent difference or the number difference column, or the arrows for that matter, I guess that's why they're there, you can see that there's a lot of variation between, this is the MSU campuses, with MSU Bozeman leading the way in terms of numerical growth in FTE, and the Gallatin College percent growth, and we have MSU Great Falls COT as well, that kicked it up a notch. And the other campuses basically remaining flat, down 25 FTE basically. One more slide. On the UM side, sort of the same trend. We have half their side increasing, half decreasing. UM Missoula down about 200 FTE, the COT down about 43. Go ahead, Summer, one more. And then we have the community colleges, where we see a drop at all of the community colleges. Flathead Valley with a negative 148, but keep in mind that their FTE, I don't know what it went up one time, 28%. Jane says 55, but I don't believe her. I'm just kidding you. I believe it. It's a lot in 2 years. Okay, one more slide. Now we get into head count, and this is where it gets interesting, for me at least. Take a look at the first 2 lines. The first one is first-time freshmen coming in. In fall 2010, we had about 8,400, and you look over to fall 2011, we're at 7,993. We went down 361 heads, actual head count of first-time freshmen. So that's where then you start asking us, well, what type of first-time freshmen? Well, if you look at first-time freshmen who are residents only, we went down 360. So pretty much the total decline in first-time freshmen were residents only. And what I don't have up here is if you go one more dig into that, which is first-time freshmen who recently graduated from a Montana public high school. So they graduated last spring and they came here in fall 2011. We went down 309. That's where almost the entire decline of our first-time freshmen are at, is in that graduating class. And what we'll see, and I don't have those numbers yet, is I would say the denominator is. What's the total number of high school graduates that came out in spring 2011? Because we projected about 5 years ago it was going to go down at an accelerated pace. Well, we went like 2 years where it didn't go down, and then we went slightly down. And so I'm thinking that this is going to be that accelerated pace downward, and it's projected to go until about 2017. So that's what we have to look forward to in that first-time freshman class. And I will be willing to bet you when we get that denominator that the percent, or in other words, our college continuation rate of those students does not go down. In fact, we've been doing nothing but going up with that group for the past 5 years. So those are some of the interesting details that I have for you by campus. Go ahead. Yes, that's what I was going to mention right here. So in the lower half of this where it's by age, I have less than 18-year-olds. That's, I guess, sort of a proxy measure for dual enrollment. And I'll just put a side note in here. Along with our new policy to reduce tuition to half price and remove fees for high school students, we have a new coding system that is going to produce excellent data on dual enrollment students. To this point, I would prefer to use age, but once we get by a couple semesters, you'll see some excellent information on dual enrolled students. Anyway, you can see that the less than 18 went up by about 300. Our 18 to 24-year-old group still went up because you're getting those older, but we can expect that group to tamp down quite a bit because of our first-time freshmen who are residents are declining. A good note, though, the 25 to 49-year-olds are up. That's one of the primary goals of our College Now initiative. And then the 50 and older group is basically staying the same. Okay, I'll go one more slide. Okay, this is just an example slide. Well, it's MSU Bozeman. We have one of these for each campus, and we'll keep these up on the screen during the campus panel discussions. But really what this is just giving you is the detailed comparison of what you just saw at the system level. There's some interesting trends down below in the new students, in the head count, and the first-time freshman totals. Of course, I could have made this all easier on us by putting this all in one spreadsheet and comparing all the campuses, but I certainly can provide that. But for this purpose, when we're grouping them as campuses in the campus panel, we'll scroll through these for you. You certainly can do that as well, and if you have any questions now or later, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thanks, Tyler. I think then we can move on to campus reports.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for you. It's a choice, really. I suggested, and you agreed that it would be fine to give homework assignments to each of the regents, and so to sort of specialize in one of the campus reports, we could do those questions or comments right now, or we could do them within their panels. It's your call.
Let's do them.
Let's do them. Well, I'm happy to, I remember mine, so while I still remember it, I'm going to jump right in if I may.
Absolutely. Commissioner Stearns.
I signed myself to Montana State University, Great Falls College of Technology, so my comment really is for Joe, and Joe, congratulations. My email yesterday from Mary Mo was, the subject line said, "Say it ain't so," but apparently it is so. But my question or comment, I was particularly attracted to the paragraph that described your trip to, is it North Island College in British Columbia? I don't know quite where that was in your report, and there are many good things in the report. But correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, what it told me is that through WICHE and the resources that helped you and 2 or 3 of your staff members go to this conference, all of us who aren't, as they say, digital natives, find it really hard to believe that science can be taught online, because we cannot believe, I mean, really, we cannot believe that you can do good science labs online. Now, apparently, what this, I had Summer put a square around it, tells us is that you and your folk with the WICHE and Nanslow project, online laboratories, apparently you learned that you can. Is that right?
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Commissioner Stearns. That is still the topic of debate with this process, but there are some promising developments as part of this project that suggest in many ways science labs can be conducted online, and we're not talking specifically about science simulation, but utilizing internet technologies to control and manipulate physical equipment within a science lab to do certain experiments in physics classes, chemistry classes, as well as the science classes. This project is a unique partnership between the British Columbia community colleges, essentially, and WICHE and many campuses, predominantly the Colorado Community College system, with partners. Montana State University Bozeman is actually a partner with MSU Great Falls in both advising the project as well as faculty working on discipline panels to help test and develop laboratory experiments to be used. You know, one of the things that was surprising to us when we got to visit North Island College, beautiful location, was actually looking at tinkering, playing in the sandbox, if you will, with these virtual lab tools and equipment. And when you get right down to it, you know, I envision this walking into this massive room with lights and wires and all kinds of equipment. The reality is it's very similar to what we would find in a physical lab environment, but we're utilizing new control software to be able to manipulate those virtually. So there is quite a bit of potential there. We're moving ahead. Colorado Community College System will be offering some of those courses over the next year or two. British Columbia will continue to expand theirs. The folks at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Lumina, are incredibly interested in this project, and it shows a lot of promise. Surprisingly, the biggest hang-up we have now is debating the philosophy of what the experience is for the student using an internet technology to manipulate a lab versus being in the lab and actually pouring the liquids, seeing the changes. So very, very interesting project, and you could see significant ramifications for distance learning, especially in the sciences in the future as a result.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Chancellor Callahan, you mentioned in your report there's a bullet about Northern's Educational Opportunity Center has been refunded for 5 years to the tune of about $600,000. I'm curious, tell us a little bit more, if you would, about what educational opportunities that center provides and for who and where those funds come from.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Northern is pleased to be the host for the EOC grant fund, so we have a statewide mission in that regard. So we have outreach around the state of Montana, providing access, encouraging students to attend higher education and increasing that access. It's been very successful. We have representatives located in tribal areas as well as in residences around the state in Butte and Missoula, et cetera. So it's been a real successful program. We're pleased to host that. The office is in Northern, but really outreach is across the state.
Where do the funds primarily come from?
Federal funds,
Yeah.
with part of the trio.
Thank you.
I was
Gives you
given
Buchanan.
the pleasure to dig into President Engstrom a little bit with the University of Montana. And, one of the things that you handed out earlier this calendar year was your you call it the UM 2020 plan. And one thing that sticks out on that placard that I just think is extremely interesting and encouraging is your lofty goal of increasing study abroad experiences from 16% to 75% for your students. As I look through your campus report, I certainly see a lot of attention given to those international experiences and things that are happening, but I'm bragging about this and about your vision there, and I guess I would like to use this opportunity to ask you that's a big goal. And why, and what are some of the things that you're trying to ingrain within the culture to make sure that this goal gets accomplished in the next couple of years?
Well, thanks, Regent Buchanan. You'll hear more about this actually during our report this afternoon. I think Provost Brown is going to talk a little bit about our Global Leadership Initiative. So as you know, the title of our new strategic plan is Building a University for the Global Century. And so we think that today's education is influenced by and critically dependent upon the global thinking that is going on, whether that applies to problems and opportunities right here in Montana or around the world. We want our students increasingly to be exposed to those concepts. Ultimately, we want the goal, as in that report card, of having the majority of our students experience a study abroad as an integral part of their education. We know that we need to begin that on a scale that we can work with, and so the Global Leadership Initiative that you'll hear more about is starting on a scale of a freshman cohort of 200 students. And so they will work through a 4-year program in addition to the regular academic program that they would take. And a part of that 4-year program is a study abroad experience or some other significant beyond the classroom experience. And so it is our goal over this next 10-year period by 2020 to have that percentage of our students having that wonderful experience of a study abroad. If you talk to those students who have had that experience, it is a life-changing experience. I didn't have the good fortune of having that as an undergrad, and I suspect that many of us around the table of our generation didn't have that experience. I think it's our responsibility to provide that experience in today's world. Thank you.
Regent McLean. Oh, Regent Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Chancellor Groseth, Rolf, I was intrigued with what MSUB's College of Business is doing with regard to business plan development with private sector folks. Could you explain that a little bit more, and perhaps how MSU Billings is also engaging Montana's economic development nonprofit community in that, and whether or not there's an effort to make sure that this is an ongoing effort by MSUB?
Mr. Chairman, Regent Tuss, our business college, we exist in the largest business environment in our state, and we're fairly closely connected with many aspects of the business community. I mentioned in the report that we have had a investor in residence here in the last a few weeks, and that's been a lot of fun and great education for our students. Ron Bassini runs the West Virginia Angel Fund, and so it was great to have him on campus, and most students are, this is kind of new stuff to them, and it's great to have them understand that. Each one of our students, before they graduate, is required to produce a business plan for a local business or nonprofit in the community. And actually, the head of our Salvation Army was chastised for having spent the money to develop a business plan for his operation in Bozeman, and it took him a little while to explain to his superiors that this was done by students at Montana State University Billings. They were pretty impressed with the professionalism of it, and a couple of our students this last weekend won a national competition, a business simulation competition. So we're trying to support our local business community. They support us very well, and we work with both for-profit and nonprofit organizations, and that connection's been very strong over a long period of time and continues to be.
Thank you. Regent McLean, you ready now?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the great opportunity of paying extra special attention to the University of Montana Helena, and I want to congratulate Dr. Bingham and all of the faculty and staff there on record-breaking enrollment again, so congratulations there. This was really a great opportunity, I think, for us, Chancellor Stearns, I think, to really focus in on one of these, and I want to tell each of the campuses, thank you for all of the great work that you do and for showcasing it in the 1 to 2 pagers that you do. Specifically to the Helena College of Technology, one of the things that stood out was the work being done by Cindy Yarberry and Tammy Steckler. It seems to me that in education there is nothing more important than we can do than to extend opportunities for those with disabilities and those who have served our country and make our education accessible to them. And I want to commend those ladies for their leadership in that regard. And I guess I am just wondering from you, Dr. Bingham, and perhaps this will plant a seed with the other campuses as well, if there are specific policies or work that can be done at this table to help you in your efforts to grow access for veterans and for those with disabilities on our campuses.
Mr. Chair, I suppose we're on. Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Regent McLean, thank you so much for the question. That's a great population that needs lots of services, and we can never overlook them to any degree at all. We have a lot of veterans in Helena coming home. We have the fort there, and so we provide a lot of services to our veterans. In fact, we've increased significantly in that particular area. Helena has remodeled some areas within the campus, giving greater prominence and focus to those 2 areas, and we are reaching out and working with these 2 special populations that oftentimes get overlooked because they struggle to come in, ask for help, and then when they do come in, oftentimes they're not as successful as we like them to be. So we've actually increased that work with that population about 100% in the last 3 years, and given tremendous prominence to that. I think policies within the Board of Regents are extremely important, but the outreach is done one at a time with those groups. It's not so much what we do in the policy as much as we do actually physically going out and making things happen. And so it behooves us to, I guess, to take those policies and to work them one at a time with those individuals who need those special help. And so that would be our recommendation, is to really look for areas that you can make a difference physically, reaching out, touching them, and pulling them in.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I had a couple questions. One question is to President Karras, to begin with. Yeah, I have to look around the podium here. At Flathead Valley Community College, recently at one of our Regents meetings, we were able to get up there, and you hosted us very well, and it was great to see the campus and everything that was going on there. The campus was just absolutely beautiful. And it's nice to know that we have colleges in the system like this that reach to every corner of Montana. And what I read in your update, which was interesting and caught my eye, was the approach that you have towards our mission with the Regents of access and affordability, that we have to keep our university system accessible to all Montanans, and even those out of Montana that want to come to our university and higher education system. The Festival of Flavors that you hosted recently, and it was a fundraiser for you all, which helped to raise some money. Some of the money goes towards scholarships and things of that nature. You know, you've definitely had some very good success, not just in this event, but other events as well. And I was wondering, how your campus, your leadership focuses on that fundraising effort and how you implement that for the operation of the college.
Mr. Chairman, Regent Robinson, we have a FECC foundation, similar to many of the other campuses in the state, that does take the lead in raising funds for scholarships and other needs at the college, and we work very closely with them. They do have a number of events as fundraisers, all geared towards scholarships. Certainly the Festival of Flavors is our biggest, one of our largest events to raise money for scholarships. We do an annual appeal. I spend a lot of time, as do many of the other presidents and chancellors, in our community, working with community members to ensure they understand the importance of education to our community and to our state, and that their support does help us be successful and to educate students. In fact, I always like to tell our community, especially as community college, that it takes a community to build a college. And without the community support, we would not be the community college that we are and have become, because we depend on our local taxpayers, excuse me, for their support. We depend on their support for our students, and that in them providing assistance to our students' scholarships, they give to the whole community, because our students stay in the community, they work there, and they then give back to our community. Excuse me. So we do a lot with our local community members, and we're very fortunate that we did have that for a community college, a $4 million gift towards a new building, because we don't receive any state funds for buildings.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you for your efforts. I do have a second question, Mr. Chair, to President Cruzado. We certainly heard a lot of great things this morning regarding what the MSU campus and the leadership and the faculty and staff and the students. It was great to see the student representation here as well. One of the things that was recently in the news, and I think we'll talk about here a little bit later on today, is a recent donation. And you can see I'm kind of on a theme here today, but these are certain things that kind of caught my attention from Mr. Jake Jabs. And the donation of $25 million to the university. This is something that, from my understanding, is unprecedented here, and I'm curious about how the decision was came about to focus that on a new facility for the College of Business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Regent Robinson. First of all, the board will have an opportunity today to receive that board item, and I think that Mr. Jabs will be joining us later today, if he's not here already. Not yet. The decision happened more or less in this fashion. Last December, Mr. Jabs approached us. He had initiated a series of conversations with Dean Dan Moshavi, and from the College of Business. And as you know very well, Mr. Jabs is a graduate of Montana State University, class of 1952, College of Agriculture. But he went on, and his life really exemplifies what a true entrepreneur is. And therefore, he discussed with us the possibility of opening or establishing last December the Center for Entrepreneurship in the New West, and that will carry his name. For that purpose, Mr. Jabs gave us $3 million. And not only that, this last summer, then he invited 16 business majors to accompany him to a trip to China, so that they could get to see him in action, how he interacts with the different merchants, the different considerations that take place. Therefore, in an opportunity that I had to visit Denver, Mr. Jabs was so gracious, and he invited me to tour American Warehouse Furniture, or American Furniture Warehouse, which is his company. And in the course of that conversation, he mentioned that he wanted to do something more for Montana State University. And one of the things that he brought to my attention, which I found fascinating, was that he's a very visionary man, and what he explained to me was a different setting for the students, where students could learn, and using his phrase, where they don't even notice that they are learning, that the climate, that the environment would envelop the students. Mr. Jabs is also very keen on the use of technology for instruction. So he started to paint in front of me a new structure where technology would be used to enhance the education of our students. So that's how it became evident to us that that was the right use of this donation. Let me also add that the College of Business has never had its own home. The College of Business has always coexisted with the College of Education in Reed Hall, which has been a good building, but it's a tired building. So as you will see when we have had our conversations about our long-range planning, that is also the building at this moment that produces the largest number of student credit hours, and yet we haven't had the resources to devote attention to it. So in that sense, I am absolutely honored and pleased that Mr. Jabs, such a visionary, in this occasion, once again, he walked a mile in the shoes of the individuals who will be using that, and said it's about time for us to do something for the students of the College of Business. And he also mentioned from every college at Montana State University, because in his mind, every discipline can benefit from having an entrepreneurial twist. So that was the conversation. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Regent Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make a couple, if you could pull up the one for Montana Tech, I'd appreciate it. And add a couple comments and questions, I guess, for Chancellor Blackadder. I noticed the very first item I'm interested in, and wonder if you might comment, if you can highlight that. There's was some recognition of some research on this battery diagnostics, and I thought it was interesting. You know, it's a crossover, I mean, with the way the world's going, what we're doing in our country, and probably what the world's doing in terms of battery usage for automobiles and other things. This, I guess, is where research and then the practical use come together, and I was pleased to see it was noted by the Wall Street Journal, and I guess I wondered if you could tell us a little more about that and comment on that. That was a really interesting, just a really interesting article, piqued my interest.
Mr. Chairman, Regent Barrett, thank you for that opportunity. Dr. Morrison is a nationally recognized researcher in the area of grid work, and in particular his battery research. He came to us from the Idaho National Engineering Lab a few years ago, and so that helped him with his relationship in getting that grant. We are very proud of him and Dr. Trudnowski and their work on battery research and grid technologies. One of the issues that face this country as we bring green technologies onto line is the difference in how we generate power. It used to be very local and distributed broadly. Now it's becoming very distributed, and also the distribution is wide. One of the issues we face is load leveling. The wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. And so when you bring these technologies onto the grid, they cause a certain set of problems that they need to be addressed. And this is one of the areas specifically that Dr. Morrison has worked on, is how do we do that with battery energy storage techniques that can actually help us put these green technologies online without, in many cases in Montana, adding natural gas power plants to do load leveling. So it's an important piece for both the nation and for Montana.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really intriguing. And then, if you go down that item, near the bottom of that page, there's an item that starts with Dr. Chris Gammons. I just think this, you can comment to the extent you know, but I think it's quite interesting. The professors were working with the Tributary Fund, which is a nonprofit here in Bozeman. In fact, it happened to be a rather substantive article about that, I think, on the front page of the Big Sky section of the paper yesterday. Very different type of an organization. Again, it's a nonprofit, non-governmental organization that decided to, I'm not sure what the phrase would be, but they work to do developmental work utilizing religious organizations, starting with the premise that they're already organized, they want to do good work, so they just need maybe someone to help them show the way. So they've been harnessing it, and it's interesting around Bozeman. It's not uncommon now to see groups of Tibetan monks walking the streets because they work often with Tibet. And I was very intrigued that they'd found their way to Butte, so I'd be interested in that.
Well, Montana Tech has a very unique role in the state in the natural resource area, mining, petroleum engineering in particular, but also our ecology restoration programs. And as some of the issues have faced the United States, certainly those industries have exploded overseas. And when you go to around the world, especially the developing countries, their interest in mining and environmental issues in combination are very critical to them creating those resources in a sustainable and environmentally friendly way. So I think it was natural for them to come to Montana Tech as one of those unique programs in the United States that offer both the combination of sort of the mining and the ecology restoration combination.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And finally, if you go down near the bottom of the second page, there's a little paragraph that starts Montana Tech. I know this will be painful for you, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to brag about the recognition Montana Tech has received in the U.S. News and World Report rankings of colleges. I think it speaks for itself, but I'll just give you a chance to do some chest thumping on that because I thought it was really laudable, the awards that were given.
Thank you, Regent Barrett. I was hoping you would give me an opportunity to expound upon this issue. As you see, there are lots of categories, and I don't want to diminish that at all, but I want to give credit to our faculty and our staff and our students for being ranked #1 of the best regional universities in the West, and what does it say, #4 overall, and also ranked by another organization as the #40 best engineering undergraduate program in the nation. This is probably at least in the top 10%, depending upon how you count undergraduate programs. So just so the people of Montana can be very proud of the gem or the gold nugget, to use some analogies that Montana has at Montana Tech in Butte, Montana. Thank you, Regent Barrett.
I guess it still is the richest hill on earth. Well, anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to start out by thanking all of our campus leaders for taking the time to make these reports, because I think it's been really helpful for me to gain an understanding of the breadth and the quality of the programs that are going on at all of our campuses. And being the youngest region, I am going to talk about 2 campuses right now. And the first one, I wanted to ask President Hickswatt to talk about a program on their campus which I was intrigued by, which is the Miles Community College Educators Conference, which I understand you actually gave a presentation at. And if you could, I'd like to hear more about that, and then also how that relates to how outreach is done at Miles Community College.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Regent Teal. We have been doing this Educators Conference for several years, and the idea behind it was to provide an opportunity for Eastern Montana residents not to need to travel all the way to the MEA conference. When it's in Billings, that's easy for our people, but when it's in Missoula, that can get a little bit more difficult with budgets and things. And so we have this conference, and hundreds of educators come on those 2 days, and we cancel classes on those 2 days, and our faculty also participate in professional development opportunities. This year, our keynote speaker was an educator talking about brain theory, And so she gave 4 different sessions over the 2 days on the different brain research and how to engage students. And what all of the presenters do is to try to make it appropriate for kindergarten teachers all the way through college level teachers. And our faculty gain a lot of new ideas for engaging students as well. K-12 instructors say this is the best thing. And one of the best things that happens for us is all those educators are on our campus and get to interact with our instructors. And my workshop was on solutions for conflict resolution, and so we talked about different ideas of ways to handle not necessarily discipline in the classroom, but conflict that arises, whether it's with students or parents, depending on the situation. So it's a great opportunity for outreach. This is just one of the areas that we have for workforce development to offer opportunities for Eastern Montana residents to continue their education, whether it's through credit or non-credit. This conference happens to be available for credit. Students who decide to take it for credit pay the regular tuition and write a paper that is graded and followed up to meet the goals of the course. But our other classes, we're doing things in the area of CDL training for workforce development. We do CPR training. We're doing certified nurse assistance training all over Eastern Montana.
Great, thank you very much. I just thought that was interesting, largely because I think it shows the incredible services that we're providing in and out of the classroom at all of our campuses. So thanks a lot. And then next I wanted to provide some congratulations to Chancellor Story. What I noticed about your report, and it's right at the top, and I'm not sure if it's still confidential, but it's a testament to the quality of the faculty at UM Western and across the system that you're receiving your 3rd Carnegie State Professor of the Year.
Well, that's true. Right now, our professor is in Washington, D.C., and I think the ceremony starts there in about 15 minutes. So at 1:30 this afternoon, when we have our campus presentation, I will be more than happy to explain all of that. It's actually the 3rd winner in the row. The first winner was the National Professor of the Year, and then last year was the Montana Professor of the Year from the Carnegie Foundation, and this is also the Montana Professor of the Year. So I'll have more to say about it when it's strictly legal with our friends at Carnegie, if you don't mind.
Well, I think that deserves some incredible congratulations.
Yes, we're quite proud of our faculty.
Well done.
Thank you. I think we'll just dive right into this panel if MSU is ready. It will be similar to the conversations we're having. We're trying. Yeah, you missed it. We're trying to be responsive to several needs. One, we used to do a bit more sort of campus-like presentations as part of the budget process. We didn't do that this year. I think we'll see how board members like this forum for these types of conversations. It's important as board members we try to get some grasp of what's going on at the campus levels and them to be able to both discuss and to some extent showcase what they're doing campus specific and also just to have some interaction with the board. So we both did these questions and we'll have a MSU panel this morning and a UMM panel this afternoon to try to allow some time for campus leaders to interact with the board on what specifically is going on. So with that brief introduction, President Cruzado, we'll turn it over to you and move into your panel. I do really want to allow the time that we set out to do it, so we'll run a little bit into academic research, but Steve's usually long, so this time we'll make him be short.
Thank you very much, Chairman Christian and members of the board. For this panel, we have invited chief academic officers and student services individuals who coordinate this effort. Let me just, while they get ready, please go ahead and sit down. And what we would like to do is to discuss with you some of the initiatives that are already going on in regards to advising in our campuses, but more importantly, our goals for the future. Provost Martha Potvin and Vice President Alan Yarnell have been coordinating the work of a huge task force that includes representation from our 4 campuses, and they have been working both on an inventory of current effective practices so that we can learn from each other, but also identify novel opportunities to better serve our students, and in that paying attention to the different needs that our students have. If it's our freshman population or sophomore population, what about adult learners? What are the needs of veterans? All those different considerations are part of our conversation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Provost Potvin, who will then introduce the panel and proceed with her presentation. Thank you.
To be here today. Advising is important for the success of our students and retention. Since last spring, an MSU-wide task force has been studying how we achieve good advising on our campus, what things we do well, what things we can improve upon, and having a conversation about sharing best practices, developing common language around advising. And this committee included staff, professional staff, and faculty. Today, I'd like to have each college talk about their advising on their campuses as part of this panel, and then I'll wrap things up at the end with MSU Bozeman. First, I'd like to introduce Judy Hay from Great Falls. Judy?
Thank you. Do we do anything? Present? Have that right. Is that it? Okay. Sorry. Good morning, Commissioner Stearns, Regents, and Dr. Potvin. We have at MSU Great Falls been working on advising and a host of other things. We gave a little folder of some information to you that Joe is much more eloquent talking about than I am, but this is basically our operational plan, and I wanted you to be aware of that, because if you get a chance to look it over, you will see that what we're really doing that kind of centers on advising at MSU Great Falls is a very integrated model, and it's not just a isolated piece of what we do. So advising at MSU Great Falls is one of the many projects that we have, and we have groups working on all of these pieces. We have looked at advising several different ways at MSU Great Falls, and now have landed on what we think is really an important element, which is we've switched to a completely holistic model of advising, which to us means that students will get one advisor when they enter our college, and we'll keep that advisor for their whole life at MSU Great Falls. What we had before was they would get a faculty advisor in the program that they chose, and then when they would switch programs, they'd get another advisor, and switch programs again, you get another advisor. And so there wasn't anybody that really consistently knew that student all the way through. As we researched best practices in advising, that relationship is extremely important. So that's what we have done. The other thing that pushed this part of the decision was that we have faculty who were advising, but we needed them to do some other things that really only faculty can do. And so as a lot of people find, or a lot of campuses find, faculty advising is difficult to assess and evaluate, but it's also done differently with every advisor, every faculty advisor. While that is a good thing, there's not a lot of consistency to that. And as part of the student affairs cadre of work, we wanted to be able to measure advising and be able to point at specific learning outcomes. So that's why we switched to this. And then faculty are freed to do some other things that are relational to students as well. So they will dig deeper into their content area and engaging with that with students. They will be more involved as they have more time to get involved with that as a student leaves the institution to connect with their field of study and a job in the end. So they're busy with a lot of those types of things too. So beginning this fall, we switched to kind of a model, if you're familiar with Western Governors University, and we hired several professional advisors and took advising away from most of the faculty. This is a transition because, again, relationship is the centerpiece of advising, so we don't want to yank a good relationship away from advisors and advisees. So that will be kind of a multiple semester journey. So the students will get an advisor and work with that advisor to have some specific learning outcomes, which there's a one-page thing in your packet that shows you where we are with this. We plan to have a full advising syllabus very soon that will outline all of the relationship responsibilities and where students will find their materials, who their advisor is, and the learning outcomes of advising. It'll also talk about the specific times of the semester, times of the year that they need to work with advisors. So we have a new advising center. Faculty are busy on a host of projects that have to do with working with students and student success. They're redesigning courses and doing a lot of things. This piece is really exciting to us on our campus. And so we hope that you'll have some time to read it. And our outcomes are coming right out. We have seen that as an outcome of possibly that we hope is holding. We had on our first day of enrollment for spring semester, we had jumped 50%, 57% in the first day enrollment. And we think that it's partially because of advising and partially because of a student success course that we've implemented that is part of advising as well, where students actually are getting points in that class for registering for their spring semester classes. So that's a good engagement piece too, and we just are excited about what we're doing there at Great Falls, and we'll entertain any questions at any time.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Lindsay Brown from MSU Northern.
Good morning. I believe that's working. All right, and our first start of advising, thank you, comes with orientation, and that is where we have a blend of both faculty and staff working with students. When the students arrive to their advising session, they get a pre-prepared registration sheet that includes all of their test scores, their math, their English placement, and 2 or 3 courses that are recommended towards their major. They're not actually registered, so the students are able to go in themselves and do that registration. They get the hands-on experience, and faculty and staff are there to assist them as needed. Also, with all of our transfer students who do have transfer agreements, we have transfer advising sheets. So the student, as long as they completed the same sequence of courses through our transfer articulation agreements, they'll come in, have a sheet that says what they've completed, what they still need to complete for their degree program, which is awfully nice and exciting. Throughout their program, to support our students, we do have Student Support Services, which is a TRIO federally funded program. Although more students qualify for this, we have about 242 students who are registered through Student Support Services, which is 18.5% of our population, which is just amazing that that many students participate and get this benefit. So we're very excited about that. All right, and then we do have an advising center. All students start out in the advising center. This includes undeclared new freshmen, new transfer students. After that first semester, then they are transitioned into a faculty advisor because we do feel that that faculty connection is so very important. Our faculty advising is required each semester. It's intrusive advising. What they do is, in order to enable that, is they have an advisor code that each student must get from their faculty advisor. They have an individualized meeting with their faculty advisor. They're able to build that relationship, get to know their faculty on a personal level and a professional level, which is very exciting. Builds a great relationship. The other thing that we do that is a little unique is for our advisor codes that we use that the faculty distribute. We coordinate with our friends in Great Falls so that they do have one code for both institutions so that they don't have to run to each campus or different advisors in order to get that one code and register. We want to make it as simple as possible for them. And then we end up with career advising. One of the things that we are so proud of is our placement rates. We have 92% of our graduates employed in their field within 6 months of graduation. And I really strongly believe that this is attributed to our academic programs and the hands-on experiential learning requirements. As you can see, many of our leading programs do have those hands-on experience for every single one of those students, and I believe this helps them with a good transition into the workforce.
Thank you, Lindsay. Let's move next to MSU Billings and Mark Pagano.
Thank you, Provost Potvin. Well, I've only been at MSU Billings for 6 weeks, but in that relatively short time, I've learned to very much appreciate our advising operation. And the reason I appreciate it is because I've learned that the students, the faculty, the staff, everybody that works at MSU Billings really appreciates our advising center and our student affairs operation in general. So it's an easy thing to appreciate, and I'm very proud of it. Next slide. And I've also learned from Chancellor Grosef, and then again this morning from President Cruzado, that bragging is okay to do in front of our Board of Regents. So I'd like to start with a quote. We've been working with Noel Levitz, the Retention Consulting Service, for the past year, and Tim Culver, the Vice President, recently made the quote that we have on the screen here, that best practices come to mind since you, and he's talking about us, MSUB, have quite a few. Your intake split model and your arrangements with the colleges also come to mind, and all that seems to work well. Other colleges may not have as good of a system as you do. So let me explain what our system looks like quickly. We have 2 locations. We have our advising center on our university campus on the east side of town up against the Rim Rocks. There are 5 full-time professional advisors on the staff there. We have a part-time adult learning specialist, and then we have a full-time walk-in advisor who keeps her schedule open for any walk-in students so she can serve them immediately and won't have appointments ahead of time. Also out at our College Technology, about 7 miles to the west, we have 3 full-time professional advisors out there. Like Northern, all students begin their journey through the Advising Center. Whether they're a transfer student, a new student, or a returning student, you start at the one-stop shop. Students are assigned an advisor based on their major, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And students are then later transferred or handed off to a faculty advisor in their respective departments, typically 1 to 3 semesters after they arrive at MSUB, depending on if they're at the College of Technology or one of the programs on the East Campus. What sets our advising staff apart, our advising system apart? Each advisor has a specific set of majors they work with, so they're specialized in a particular area. Another thing that really sets us apart is our advisors evaluate transfer credit immediately upon receipt of that, so that they can take that into account when they advise the students on their first semester at MSUB. Students have easy access to our advisors almost around the clock, even during breaks in summertime. And both of our advising staffs are centered around a one-stop shop. That's what we call it on the university campus, and they call it the Jacket Student Central out at our COT. When they come into the advising area, all of our student services are located in the same spot. Career services, financial aid, their ID, everything is in that one very nicely remodeled area. Next slide. Okay, I won't read through all these, but our advising staff go above and beyond the call of duty in many areas. Even though we're located so centrally to our students, can get to us very easily. We do take our show on the road. Our advising staff will go to the college and advise students in groups. They'll go to the library. They'll go to the athletics areas. So they're out and about a lot. Our advising staff put in a lot of man hours, or our person hours, participating in our freshman seminar class, ASC 294. We typically have 13 sections of that each semester, and our advising staff contribute to several presentations during that seminar course, and we're very appreciative of that. So there are many things where they go above and beyond the call of duty. They administer the placement test, the Spanish placement test, the Compass placement test. So we're really proud of them. But I'm an engineer and I like numbers, so let's look just at a couple numbers to close up. In our 2010 No 11th Student Satisfaction Survey, our students ranked approachability of advisors, concern that the advisors have for them as individuals, and knowledge of their major as the top things and importance to them on campus. And then more important to that, when you ask them about how we stack up in achieving those things, the MSU Billings students rated us higher than the national average in all three of those categories. And at the bottom, we have the numbers there. On a 5-point scale, we were 0.11 higher on approachability, 0.12 higher on our advisors are concerned for their success, and 0.24 higher on how knowledgeable our advisors are about their particular majors. So we're very proud of our advising staff, and I'd be glad to entertain questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to begin my part of the presentation by sharing information from the Bozeman campus and then wrapping up with some things that the MSU campuses plan to work on together. On a large, complex campus like Bozeman, we have aspects of advising that are centralized in undergraduate studies, especially for students who have not yet decided on a major. And we move to individualized advising by faculty within departments. And then we also have the very, very individualized mentoring that goes on when students work with faculty in a research setting. So they get lots of advice in many different forms on the campus. This slide results from a survey of more than 60 units on the Bozeman campus, and it depicts the weighting given to different aspects of advising. If you look at the blue, those are areas where advising is strongly emphasized, the red moderately emphasized, and the green not emphasized at all. So the most emphasis goes on advising on academic issues, and moderate emphasis goes on the bottom on advising of personal issues with students. So the data that we collected are rich and help us to plan for the future. Next slide, please. Some of the outcomes of our task force include using Advisor ID on MyInfo. Our sister campuses already use this capability so a student can very easily find out who their advisor are. We have not yet implemented that on this campus, but we will through this summer so that students coming back in the fall should be able to easily tell who their advisor is. We'd also like to expand the use of students in advising. Students really appreciate peer advising. We have the training of peer advisors occurring in our advising center, and we use peer advisors in our orientation program. And we're trying to figure out ways to expand peer advising. We'd also like to reinforce and develop a better culture of advising on our campus. In Bozeman, we have the capability for advisors to give a student a PIN number or a code number to have access to completing their next new schedule, but some students have figured out ways to get around that process. We'd like to tighten that up, and we think we can do a better job in expanding the amount of time that students have to get advising when that registration period opens up. Faculty will have a better spread of advisees to meet them, and students will have a better chance of finding their advisor in their office. So we're going to look at some things like that. Reinforcing expectations with the faculty that advising is a primary responsibility as part of their teaching responsibility. We'd like to see that reflected in a more strong way in hiring paperwork, in role and scope documents for departments and for tenure and promotion. This fall, we implemented a new initiative for faculty professional development, and we hope to offer workshops on topics such as how to initiate conversations with students that go beyond just what they should take in the next semester, or workshops on how to evaluate the quality of advising. So how do we assess it? How do we tell when it's being very effective? We also plan to expand our attention in our next orientation of new faculty. We used to devote a long period of time. We've shortened that, and we think it needs to be increased again. So we'll do that beginning this summer. Also, in reinforcing that we value good advising, we plan in next year's convocation in the spring to given an advising award. So create the criteria for which faculty would be competitive for that, and reward advising in a number of ways, an award being one of them. Finally, we know that the number one reason that students drop out of universities is because of financial issues. With support of ASMSU, Emily Fleming of the Student Assistance Foundation has agreed to make a presentation on financial literacy to students after Thanksgiving break in the sub here. For students, financial literacy includes understanding debt, debt management, credit, budgeting, long-term financial planning, and having the ability to respond every day to financial decisions. We think, and they think, they could use more of that. Next slide, please. As a result of our task force, we agreed on some common approaches. There are two important initiatives that all the MSU campus have agreed to work together on. The first is a statewide advising summit to be held within the next year for professional and faculty advisors. We wanted to keep up the momentum from our task force and learn about best practices from other institutions. There are some small institutions that do things that wouldn't work in a big institution, but what you do at a small institution might work for a college at a big institution. So we think there are many ways that we can intersect and continue to carry this conversation onward. The second initiative is DegreeWorks. Next slide, please. DegreeWorks is a degree audit software system that allows real-time, web-based, student-driven, on-demand course planning. It allows the interactive what-if scenario planning for degrees, options, and course changes, and down the road it should even be able to allow students to look at what it would take to complete a degree on another campus. So we think that's important, and it ties in with Common Course numbering and could really be a service to students.
Mr. Chairman, Martha, how far down the road would you anticipate that, just out of curiosity?
It depends how smoothly the implementation goes. We have the
Okay.
software ordered. We hope to get it implemented this summer, start using it in the fall. And for people on our task force who have used it before, I think that the students will teach us how to use it as well as we figure it out ourselves and get training for our faculty. So implementing on the 4 campuses is the primary goal, and then we'll look at integrating after that. The software should also help to let us predict course demand in the future. Next, please. The best part of our task force was that it further opened some channels of communication between our campuses and gave us a forum for deep conversations about what our students need and deserve and want to be successful, and what our campuses need to provide good advice to students. We developed broad agreement on some central tenets to guide our work that can be summarized here in 4 points. All students have reliable and consistent advising that's done in a comprehensive way, individualized to the student, and an integral part of their educational plan for the whole 4 years. Also, all students have access to faculty and professional advisors who are prepared and supported with the appropriate technology and technological tools. I'm hoping that we have a few minutes to answer questions if they've come up, and our panelists are ready as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Questions, Chairman Regent Barrett?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really a comment. I'm very appreciative that we had this discussion. I think that we've talked about it a lot, and probably the most significant factor in graduation rates, perseverance, retention is good advising. And to see the focus on this is really good. I think there probably is no more critical thing that we're doing. Thank you.
Regent McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and each of you for your presentations today. I concur with Regent Barrett's statement. One of the things I think that we all know is that not all of our students are on campus, and with the growth of online learning, and I'm thinking in regards, especially I think where some of our students may not be on campus, especially perhaps from 8 to 5 with maybe master's level or doctoral classes. I guess I'm wondering if there has been conversations or any thought given to online advising communities using Skype or other programs so that those students have access to the quality advisors that the students on campus or in the same community have.
It'll come up? Okay. Thank you for the question, Regent McLean. We have several robust online programs that are fully online programs and have a couple of nationally recognized faculty. One is in Maine, who go around and they present on their online advising program. So we have not touched those students because they're currently receiving the best in the land, we think, of online advising. They use their D2L shell, their learning management system, and chats and several tools. And so at this point with our brand new advising center, we're not touching that until those advisors can be trained and really bring that up. So that faculty member of ours in Maine is teaching our new advising center staff how to do this better so that they can start out with advising rooms in D2L and do that better. Because again, we don't want to take a step backward for any student, and our online students are served very, very well with that advising model.
Thank you. And I was just wondering, just as a follow-up, if you could speak to on campus here, specifically in regards to the upper division students who may not live in town or on campus.
Well, we do have advising for online students. I would have to defer to folks who teach who administer our online programs to do that. And we're bringing up programs just beginning. In the graduate programs, of course, most of them have a cadre of faculty who are working closely with them online, so they get that individualized help there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm just asking, I think, just specifically, I think in regards to students who are not online but are just making a commute once or twice a week and just don't have that opportunity to get the online advising or the advising face-to-face. So thank you for the great work that you're doing.
Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much like Regent McLean's question regarding those students that are online and taking courses, that population, from what we're seeing, is growing. Certainly here in Montana, it's really a necessity, it seems like, anymore. In the same manner you see with tribal colleges, their enrollment growing and keeping those students, at least for the first couple years, closer to home, and then hopefully, especially through the transferability of the courses, that they can then come into the Montana University system. And I was curious about what you all are doing as far as those advising and making sure that we reach those students as well. I know even at MSU Billings, that even though enrollment has dropped slightly there, that the American Indian enrollment has risen. And so I think we're kind of seeing that there is more of an interest there, and we want to make sure that we're addressing the needs of all of the students in our system. How might you be addressing that?
Yeah. Is Kim Obing here? No. And I don't know the details of our online advising. So I appreciate the comment, though.
Actually, as a follow-up, it isn't particular to online, but to the actual students coming to the campus, the American Indian students coming on campus and enrolling and continuing in the four-year system, is if I know that there's at least some resources available through MSUB, and I just was wondering what type of advising is taking place in that area as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to admit, I've only been there 6 weeks, so I don't know all the details, but we do have a pretty robust online offerings at our campus, and I know a lot of advising takes place by phone. I do know that there are expectations with students once they begin to do their coursework 24/7 in the middle of the night, after work, whatever. They also gain expectations of getting their advising and all their help 24/7 too. So I don't know how our campus has addressed that yet. That's something I will be looking at as provost, is what kind of services we provide to those students, because once you agree to take that step and you'll let them do their studies any time of the day or night, then you'll have to provide help and access, advising, all those kinds of things 24/7 as well. And there are firms that will help you do that. If you can't start a 24/7, 365-day operation, there are like call centers that can help you do those kinds of things. So we definitely need to look at that. Thank you for your question.
President Cruzado.
Yes, Regent Christian and Regent Robinson, in the case of Native American students and Montana State University Bozeman, first of all, I need to say that the portfolio of online programs is not as developed in Bozeman as we aspire to grow it. In the specific case of the Native American students, we have a very interesting arrangement with our Department of Native American Studies, in that that department functions at the same time as an academic program that offers the master's degree, but also it has complementary student services. So that's the home, for example, of extraordinary staff as Jim Burns. So Jim Burns takes it upon himself to sit down with each student. The Regents had an opportunity this morning to listen to a wonderful student, Charlotte. And in her presentation, I heard once again what I hear every time that I sit down with a Native American student. And it's words of admiration for the job of Jim Burns. And it's because he takes it on a personal level. He refers it to the departments when assistance from those departments are needed. So it is, at this stage, a very individualized approach that stems from the Department of Native American Studies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Regent Teal.
Yeah, I just want to extend upon that, and I agree with you, Regent Robinson, that Native American students and veterans are two important groups of students that often need special attention. I like a lot of the strides that have been taken on the Bozeman campus, some of which we heard about this morning, the AERO program and the advising in the Native American Studies Department, and then also the opening of the Veterans Center downstairs. And I would invite the other campuses to maybe talk about how you're working with those groups of students in particular.
Well, at MSU Northern, we do advising via phone, via chat also, or email. We really do try and make it easy for students. And another thing that we have done is partnered with the bus system in northern Montana, and our students can ride that bus for free, and that includes from our reservations that are the closest to us, which is very exciting. So if the student does want to come on campus, there is a daily service for that. In terms of veterans, we are working on additional staffing at MSU Northern to help address veterans' needs and compliance issues.
Thank you. Chancellor Callahan.
Thank you. Wait for the mic to come up here. Okay, there we are. Thank you for your question. I wanted to add that part of that trio question that we had earlier, and a lot of discussion on veterans, to address that first, MSU Northern is very proud to host the Veterans Upward Bound grant as well as part of TRIO. Our office is housed at Billings, and we're very pleased to provide a statewide mission. When Dean Bingham was talking, I can remember conversations where veterans are serviced at any campus in the state through that Veterans Upward Bound program that MSU Northern hosts, again, for a statewide mission. So it's been very successful. And Luke Petruccioni at MSU Billings in the office, an MSU Northern employee, but housed at MSU Billings, which shows the partnership within the system, does an excellent job for the veterans in referring them for post-secondary educational opportunities statewide. It's been very successful. We have been complimented recently by two of the reservations, two local reservations near Havre, for our move on appointing a multicultural coordinator. So, Regent Robinson, to address your question, having personal contact, working closely with our Sweetgrass Society, that advisor has a one-on-one contact with all Native American students. I just wanted to address those 2 points. Thank you, and thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Yes, I need a follow-up comment as well to Regent Robinson. Thank goodness for people that are listening and will correct me when I'm wrong. But our CIO at our institution, Michael Barber, is here, and he said that we do have online advising, especially for the first appointment with our students through Illuminate. Illuminate is a tool that the people on the other end don't necessarily have to have that. They just need a PC with a little camera on it. So the first time we advise a special population student or an online student who can't come to campus, we use that tool. We also use chat and email and phone as well. And the Illuminate tool is a video conferencing two-way, computer to computer.
Thank you.
At MSU Great Falls, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the veterans question too, and Native Americans on our campus. We last fall, a year ago last fall, had a real special Veterans Week that got a lot of people involved and excited on our campus, and especially the veterans. And so the kind of follow-on action that came from that was the establishment of a Veterans Center on our campus, and we just had to find what little spot we could, and so it's kind of a funny little room, but it is always full, and the veterans supporting other veterans, they do their homework in there, they help one another. It's a really supportive, wonderful place. And we found that students that are coming back to school, brushing up through the ABLE program, who are veterans, find it a comfortable place for support as well. So we think that's a very strong element on our campus, and we had another just bigger and better veterans celebration a couple of weeks ago, and that was really exciting on our campus. Native American students have a club on campus, and it's another very supportive group of people that help one another. They have found different staff members and faculty to be their advisors, and that's been a very supportive group. We're currently looking for a place for them to have as well, because we've seen what it does for veterans, and we know that the same is true for our Native American students, is to have a place that is theirs and a home. So that's the next big search for space on our campus.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up, I commend you in those efforts, and I ask for a particular reason, because just like Regent Teal had mentioned, that if we're really trying to reach out to veterans, those individuals that really we would like to see on our campus, and the same with American Indians, is that pays off a lot, because I know the work, and I've heard Jim Burns' name many times about the work that he's done at MSU, and from the students, and not just from the leadership, but from the students, and it really makes that difference of being able to continue all the way through. And the same with, I think, MSUB, I believe it's Reno Charette there that works with the students, and she provides that place where there's continuity and that support that really carries them all the way through. So I think that we're seeing a higher success rate because of those efforts, and I want to thank you and encourage you to keep doing the same.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Provost. You mentioned freshman continuation rates are affected primarily, or you said, I think, the financial reasons are the most reason students drop out. And well, I think that's largely true. I just want to make a comment, just context, but in a Witchy plenary session a couple meetings ago, there was a fairly large discussion about that. And I think in a fairly data-driven study, I think freshmen responded that failure to make progress was maybe the biggest reason that they dropped out, which I think is largely related to financial concerns as well. You spend X thousands of dollars and end up with 6 credits. But You know, the two things that they sort of cited as low-hanging fruit on this is advising, which clearly you guys are on top of, and I commend your efforts there. The other one, interestingly enough, which Regent Barrett and I have talked about a fair amount, and my MSU freshman just walked in the back room, so she'll find offense to this, but the other one that they really cited as low-hanging fruit was attendance. And taking attendance in particular in freshman classes that had a dramatic impact. Have you looked at that interaction at all? And have you guys as a campus or campuses discussed that concept?
One of the best practices is having some small sections for students. So we do have freshman seminars for students that we have low sections in so that we can keep track on some of these students. But we haven't done a data-driven study on that at our campus.
Joe Schaefer.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, well, there are many good things going on at all of our campuses, and you can hear those. When we look at the persistence rates, especially over time for many of our students, they're not quite changing the way that we want them to change. And that's really what prompted us to take a new look at the way we're advising our students and looking at who our students are specifically on MSU Great Falls campus. And what we find over and over again, well, their failures or failure to persist oftentimes is focused on academic performance, and we see that in their grades. They're non-academic issues that they're struggling with. For our first generation students, adults with families, all of those things, we see over and over again that it's not necessarily their academic ability, it's the support structures, the non-academic support structures that they're dealing with. So as Judy Hay referenced in our operational plan that you all have, you'll see a series of strategies in here that talk about those low-hanging fruits. And one of them is a strategy where we will create and connect a model of early predictive behaviors of student performance, and that includes coming to a common grade reporting system, having early attendance and academic progress reports that can be accessed easily by our students and accessed easily by our advisors in our new advising center so we can intervene early on. We have the data that shows when students are given the nod that their academic progress is unsatisfactory, if we can get to them early, they actually improve. But our students don't have that type of connection. So I think both of those things need to be taken into context as we develop and work on our advising models, that a lot of time the academic planning, the course planning, is not the issue for our students. It's helping them with those comprehensive, those holistic needs. And then we also have to get very proactive, very intrusive, and in early assessment and early communication with our students and how they're doing in their classes. And so in our plan, you'll see strategies specifically to address those two low-hanging fruits that you referenced.
Right. Yeah, the data was pretty amazing. Proof will be decided later, but it certainly appeared to be low-hanging fruit from a lot of the data studies that they've done.
I just wanted to...
President Crisello?
Yes, Chairman Christian, and you are absolutely right. And I think that the overriding guiding principle is how can we engage those students? That's it.
Yeah.
An engaged student is a retained student. And sometimes that's through professional advising, what classes do you need to take. Others is just engaging that student in conversation in the classroom, making it meaningful, and even just walking around campus, instead of looking downwards, look ahead and make sure that you say, how are you today? That makes a difference, an immense difference in our students' life, because they know then that they are not alone, that someone cares, and that has to be the overriding guiding principle.
Thank you. Regent Buchanan.
I just want to express my enthusiasm for this conversation being elevated. Thank you very much for doing it, and it sounds like we've got quite a bit of activity in front of us. And a couple of things, I throw my support behind Regent Christian's suggestion that we explore this mandatory attendance element, in particular with the freshman year folks, because it seems to be a way for us to, as Joe put it, earlier than later identify who's doing the things it takes to be progressive. A couple thoughts. If we have this much activity in front of us, maybe, Madam Commissioner, we consider a way to evaluate if there's going to be an impact. I mean, if it's retention that we think we're going to impact, I don't know. I think it would be worth tracking some of this to see if we're going to have an impact. Regarding the advising summit that you talked about, I think that's an outstanding idea. I hope that's a system-wide summit. And as we learned this morning at a great presentation with some students and their advisors, and here all the time, it's not just faculty members that have this responsibility, as we all know. And so I would encourage us to invite representatives from every part of the campus, including upperclassmen. And I see my friend Diane Donnelly here, who's in charge of university studies, which when I was a student here, we found great impact with upperclassmen taking on that advisor role with incoming freshmen. And so as we build that conference, let's make sure that we're including everybody on campus that can give that nod to the folks on that at-risk list that President Cruzado just talked about, because I think we can have a greater impact when we recognize that each of us has that role and responsibility. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Regent Teal.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one more comment, and I think that Commissioner Stearns honed in on this too, that as we're going through this process, it also makes sense to see how we can affect transferability. And I'm excited to see how, at some point in the future, we can leverage new technologies and this entire process of looking at advising to advance the transferability initiative. And later on the same agenda, we're going to be talking about a resolution in support for that initiative, and I'm excited to see the new ways, the different ways that we can try and make that process as easy and smooth for students while also ensuring that we're maintaining the quality of the transfer. Thank you, just a comment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Regent McClain.
Mr. Chair, I just think that I would be remiss if I didn't share a personal anecdote in this regard. President Cruzado surely walks the walk when she says it's about connecting with students. I had the opportunity to come a couple of weeks ago on a Friday evening when there was a Saturday football game. Many families, lots of students were on campus. There was a lot of good things happening around campus. And there wasn't a person that we passed or a person that we saw many yards away that didn't get a greeting of Go Cats or Go MSU. And all of the folks here from MSU, I think will enjoy this. We did encounter one young man who, as we walked by, he said, "Cruzado for president."
That's right. Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you. I think sometimes things just work out, but by virtue of what topics you guys chose, I think it really added to where we're headed next, which is Todd's Committee on Academic Research and Student Affairs. It certainly is what's on our mind, and it's interesting that's what you picked, because it's something that myself and other board members have talked a lot about, this advising role, the retention role, how we get to some of these target numbers that we continue to look for in terms of degree attainment. So I thank you. I appreciate your efforts. Looks like you're doing great work in the advising area, and that's certainly something we need, so thank you. Let's take a quick break, and then we will get back onto academic research, student affairs. to the Academic Research and Student Affairs Committee as soon as we can get everybody back to some reasonable semblance of order.
Mr. Chair, when people are back to a reasonable semblance of order, I do have one more kind of introduction I'd like to make. I'll wait. When you tell me it's time, I'll be ready.
I think we've found order.
Oh, are we created
Well,
order?
it's about as good as this group gets.
Mr. Chairman, you noticed it, I think, as well as I did, but midway through the morning, we had another kind of entry into the room for an introduction I'd like to make of a couple people who weren't here earlier, and that is, and who don't often attend Regents meetings, but they often hear about Regents meetings, and that would be Dawn Christensen and her daughter Lindsay Christensen, Christian, excuse me. Yeah, speaking of spouses, Dawn is married to Mr. Chairman and is a student in the, has been a student in the university system, current or past?
Both.
Both. As Chairman Christian often says, if he ever raises tuition, he knows exactly what it means. So I would like the Assembly to know that Don Christian and Lindsay Christian are back in the corner, and we thank them for the extent that they share their family member with us in the university system. Thank you.
Dawn is a Montana Tech graduate and a University of Montana PT school graduate and is about to finish her doctorate in PT. So I'm a 3 tuition family paying man. I know about
Thank
this.
you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. I think we are ready to move to academic research, student affairs. Mr. Buchanan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and please note that this time, if we go over time, we did start 50 minutes late. I know I've building a reputation of taking up too much time. But not too late to comment on one thing. I sure like hearing Regent McLean saying words "Go Cats," and I have to say you just look radiant in Bobcat blue today, Angela. Thank you for wearing it. Deputy Commissioner Moore is here with us today. We've got a big agenda to go through. We'll try to condense quite a bit of it. As far as the consent items on the agenda, item A, we talked about this briefly at the last meeting about firming up our policies as far as what indirect costs that we recover working with both state agencies and other agencies that we partner with. If you've had a chance to look at that item, members of the committee, Regent Tuss, Regent Teal, any thoughts or anything standing out there as far as items? Great. And level 2 items, anything stick out of there? Regent Barrett.
Yeah, I feel obligated to talk on this item in that I brought it up at the last meeting and raised some concerns on the, there were 2 items, though this one's been modified, but at the time, last time, there was a religious studies major and then this Chinese studies minor. And I raised some questions, and because I did that, I followed up. I've met with Provost Potvin, and I guess I'll say I alleviated my concerns on the religious studies. It's going to be resubmitted, slightly different. And I think when it does, it'll be a good teaching moment because essentially they were going to eliminate some things, but they weren't included, and they're going to present them such a way that it'll be I guess my famous zero-sum game in terms of that. I also know, even though it's not on the agenda, I mean, it's kind of what it was when this was posted. We have one member of the public who's here wanted to comment on the efficacy of the religious studies program, and hope you would indulge, even though they pulled it from the agenda, to let her do that because it came just for that purpose. And then on the China studies minor, I had some questions, again, because there's a highly evolved Asian studies program in Missoula. I wanted to be careful how far we creep in that direction, but I fully subscribe to, and the presentation we had from the students this morning really showed us how a deep and broad education for students is valuable. And I'd love to see, frankly, we can't mandate it, but it could almost, would love to see as a requirement for people in engineering and architecture and chemistry to be getting Asian study, Chinese study minors. I mean, that's the way our world's going, and if we want to be prepared. So I'm happy that to vote to support those, but because I'd questioned them fairly hard and had interim discussions, I felt I owed it to the panel to say that I've satisfied myself in that regard. And then again, we do have a member of the public that wants to comment on that.
Perfect. Thanks, Regent Barrett. Regent Teal.
Yeah, and I just also wanted to comment on those two items specifically, because I think that there were comments from a lot of us on the board regarding those, and I think it was a teaching lesson for me as to what level of ridicule the board should provide for these sort of items. While it's good for us to take a strong look at academic requirements, I think that it's also important that we don't become so involved in the weeds that we aren't allowing the campuses to innovate. And I really think that once I knew more about these two items, the China Studies minor and the Religious Studies major, I found that this is a repackaging of programs, a repackaging of current services to add value for students. And when you're adding that sort of value, I think that that's something that we should be encouraging. And just because of partly the academic program prioritization conversations and other things, I think that we were maybe more critical with less understanding than we should have been. And so I think maybe it's a lesson for the board moving forward as to how much we should critique these items and what level of understanding we need to have of them, so that we aren't limiting the campus's ability to bring innovations to the curriculum.
Good comments from both of you. I agree. I think the process is working because these discussions are surfacing these. Christian, Regent Christian.
Sorry, this is more board education than probably should have asked it earlier, but I remember a conversation going clear back to Roger Barber about on these AA degrees, sort of a maximum credit hour load. And I can't remember what that number was, and I can't remember if these fall inside of that guideline, but I was thinking it was around 60 hours. Is that?
There is limitation, and I would presume if these are outside those boundaries, it would have been noted.
I think these are at 69 and 70, and I was surprised that, I mean, they may be, but I don't know the answer.
Subject to negotiation depending on the content, I guess, of what's, and whether or not that degree is going to be a transfer degree or a completion on the campus degree. So the board has a history of allowing more than 60 in some circumstances where it's justified in terms of what that certificate or degree will be. That said, there has been a huge push to keep the 2-year degrees at 60 and the 4-year degrees at 120. If that's the question that you're asking.
It is the question. The subject to negotiation, I guess, is this is when we need Regent Hamilton, because she had all this stuck away in her brain closet. But I thought when we went through that review that there were some outside of it that we made actually work on a plan to get back inside of the 60-hour limit. I didn't think we were very active in approving ones that were over 60 hours. I didn't think it was open for discussion after a board policy change, to be honest with you.
And I will have to plead that I may need my deputy commissioner for 2-year to jump in on this as well. But
Brandy Foster,
perchance which are we talking about, the miles item? Yes.
I don't mean to even bring out the miles item. It's not as much related to them as just the credit hours submitted in those proposals was 68, 69, I believe, and I thought it was outside of the range that we sort of etched into stone as.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's a really reasonable question. I would like to ask both John Seck and possibly Brandy Foster to speak to it, but I think you are remembering correctly that we did make, I believe, an exception for nursing, for example, at 72, but I don't remember you know, being flexible on lots of others. So let's hear from the academic officers, and if we've overlooked that in this case, well, let's
That's my memory,
touch on
is
it.
that we made some exceptions for nursing, but we had a program where we had others come back into that range, and I thought we had about a year where they had to revamp curricula to get inside the range. So,
Chairman Christian, Chairman Buchanan, members of the Regents, the proposed program for Miles, Associate of Applied Science in Agricultural Production, is an Associate of Applied Science program. So the minimum number of, or the maximum number of credits allowed for an Associate of Applied Science program is 72 credits. For an Associate of Science or an Associate of Arts transfer degree, the maximum number of credits allowed is 60. So this program would actually fall under the 72 max. Thank you.
Any other board comments? Campus leadership? It sounds like Regent Barrett, there was one member of the public that had.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dean Bingham, I apologize.
Just one quick comment. I recall the discussion about this some time ago, and we have some programs that, because of regulation, federal regulation or state regulation, some of those programs will fall beyond the 72, like our aviation program, which is FAA governed. We have to deliver a certain body of information, and unless that is completed, a student cannot sit for an A&P license and complete that program. So there will be a few programs that will be beyond the 72 hour.
Thanks, Dean Bingham. Looks like maybe you have a comment, if you wouldn't mind stating your name. Thank you.
I'm going to take a moment just to say that this is, she'll introduce herself, but you know this morning when we were talking about Montana Tech and their interaction with the Tributary Fund, the lady who will be speaking is the executive director and founder of the Tributary Fund that's been working here and with Tech, but is obviously here on another topic.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Betsy Gaines-Quammen, as Regent Barrett said, and I'm delighted to hear that you are going to be supporting the Chinese Studies minor as well as the religion major, and I just want you to know I have a great deal of love for the entire university system. I got my master's degree at University of Montana, and I am a PhD student at MSU. And I have been lucky enough to take a number of religion courses. I have never met more motivated students. I've never seen brighter students. And the ability to take these religion courses has really allowed me to hone my critical thinking skills. It's politics, history, religion, culture, and they're incredibly challenging classes, as well as classes that really create a lot of enthusiasm. And the students that I've met in these classes are among the, I think, brightest students I've ever had the opportunity to work with. So I'm really delighted that you all are thinking about supporting this, and I just wanted to weigh in and say this department has been incredibly valuable to me. So thank you all. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your comments and good luck with your PhD. Members of the committee, as far as the consent agenda, feel good that we can move it forward for action tomorrow? Great. Moving on to action items. Item A, I'd pass this to Deputy Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Chairman Buchanan, members of the board. It was exciting to begin this day with research and students and advising, and have this then come to be the next item that the board will take action upon. Montana Institute on Ecosystems arises directly from the EPSCoR grant that you heard about, the $20 million EPSCoR grant. This is a new territory and is definitely worthy of board consideration because it is new territory. This is an institute across the system as opposed to housed on a single campus. In that respect, it's somewhat of a virtual institute. There are no bricks and mortars going up in Helena, although I'd be willing to entertain that with the right donor given to me by one of the campuses who's willing to give one up. But given that we don't have that at the moment, this institute will have leads at each of our major research campuses. So Rick Hauer will be the lead at the University of Montana, and Kathy Whitlock will be the lead at Montana State University. The excitement that is growing around this institute is palpable. We met last Wednesday for a planning session at Fairmont, and this, if you pass this institute today, permission for this institute today, they are ready to hit the ground running to put in some programs and begin looking at the people that will work under this umbrella. I think some of the researchers are in the crowd, as are people who, the vice president, I don't know if the vice presidents for research, but the provosts certainly are here, who've been working on this for the last couple of years, and if there are any concerns or questions, we'll try to answer those.
Thanks, Deputy Commissioner Moore. Members of the board, any thoughts or questions that might be being raised? Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I mean, I'm definitely in favor of this. The document that we had to review for the purpose, as we get to that, I would like to suggest an amendment to that. Are we at that point now? Can we discuss it? On page 2, under objectives, item number 4, it talks about strengthening connections with regional, national, and international partners to create new opportunities for interdisciplinary collaboration and innovation in ecosystem and environmental science and education. Later on, I read in the document that we certainly, again, want to partner regionally and nationally. I think, again, keeping in mind those partners that we have even closer to home, like the tribal college campuses. If we could include that in part of that, obviously, they're not mandated to do it, but if we're reaching out to those type of partners, I think especially in this type of study, in this field, you're going to find a lot of great partners in the tribal communities with some of the studies that they have their students looking at. So if we could add that in, I would appreciate it, and I'm in favor of this.
Regent Buchanan, if you are comfortable with that as a friendly amendment, I can work with Regent Robinson on some wording, and we certainly, that is the intent of an EPSCoR grant. We do work very closely with tribal partners, and so I'd be happy to add that language in. Thank you.
As is precedent, we'll make some modifications to this before tomorrow's action the board will take, but thank you very much for your input. Any other comments from members of the board? Mr. Tuss, Regent Tuss.
My question is, how unusual is it to have an institute like this associated with the system versus a specific unit of the system? Is that something that perhaps is more usual in other states, and have we done this before, and perhaps you've gone through this in other meetings? I'm sorry if...
No, it's fair. Good question.
That's an excellent question, and it represents why this is somewhat groundbreaking, in that in the state of Montana, we have not had system-wide institutes, at least of which I'm aware. There are other states where there have been institutes that have crossed more than one institution. I don't know if I can speak off the top of my head about system-wide institutes, but there's like the Desert Research Institute. There are other institutes that have embraced more than one entity. This one is particularly unique, not only in terms of being across campuses and a system-wide institute, but also it's unique in its focus. The ecosystems that are represented in our areas, particularly a little bit out of our area in the region, going up into Canada and going into some of our neighboring states, in terms of large landscape ecosystems, water ecosystems. It is a phenomenal research arena, and we feel like with our 5-year vision is that this will have national prominence. And EPSCoR is stimulating money. It's to try experimental approaches. It's to build infrastructure. But the concept with EPSCoR is at the end of the 5-year period that you have something. And both of our research institutions have committed to supporting this concept and to making it one of our signatures.
Thank you.
Great question, Regent Tuss. Regent Teal.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment also. even just on the Bozeman campus, I know and have been very impressed with the incredible variety of support that has gone into making this, and it's been really impressive to see the number of faculty, the number of students, the number of administrators that have been working to make the IOE possible. And I'm also really excited to see that we're attempting some new and innovative ways to system-wide bring in more interdisciplinary education, which I know has been important in my education. I think it's great to see it come about in this fashion. So I'm really excited for this item.
Thank you, Regent Teal. President Ingstrom?
Thank you, Chairman Buchanan, members of the board. I just want to make a few comments about what an exemplar this program is, really, Regent Tuss, in response to your question. I've been involved in this program called EPSCoR literally since my first year as an assistant professor of chemistry. And I've been involved in it on a continuous basis ever since on all kinds of roles. This proposal that you have before you, I want you to understand what a magnificent example it is of what EPSCoR is all about, building infrastructure so that states become more competitive for research dollars on their own independently. There are two aspects of this proposal that I think are just outstanding, and one is the level of collaboration. I believe this is an unprecedented level of collaboration between the Montana State University side and the University of Montana side of our system. It's a collaboration fundamentally at the faculty level. We had faculty members interacting on this intensely over the past several years, really in getting ready for the EPSCoR proposal itself, and now this follow-on institute that supports EPSCoR. It's a collaboration at the administrative level. Our vice presidents for research, our provosts, our deans have been working tirelessly over the past couple of years to get this proposal ready for your consideration. It is a collaboration at another level, and that is one with the Office of the Commissioner. In the last couple of years, the universities have been working very closely with the Office of the Commissioner, having Deputy Commissioner Moore here as overseeing not just academic affairs but research was a huge step forward for our system when she was hired a couple of years ago. That has allowed, it has catalyzed discussions and interactions about research and about collaborative research that frankly just couldn't and didn't take place before. So I think it's a huge, huge step forward for us as a state. This collaboration is built on several other collaborative projects that have taken place in just the last few years. One of those is a cyber infrastructure project, again funded by the National Science Foundation, around instrumenting ecosystems for scientific research, again involving scientists at all of our institutions. Lastly, this is an exemplar because it is perhaps as world-class of an operation as we can put forward as the state of Montana. If you look at the quality of faculty that we have in this area, that we've hired in this area, they are the nation's leaders, they are the world's leaders in the area of ecosystem studies. If you look at the facilities that we have in place to support this, such as the Flathead Lake Biological Station, it's a one-of-a-kind facility and clearly respected worldwide for this kind of research and for the contributions that they have made. Finally, this is a world-class facility because it takes advantage in such an important way of where we are, where we reside. We have the good fortune, our institutions, of residing in one of the greatest natural laboratories on Earth, not just because of the pristine environment that we enjoy around us, but the challenges to that pristine environment that we face through watershed problems, climate change, and so on. We have access to a natural laboratory here that nobody else in the world has access to in the same way. So I think you should take incredible pride in the proposal that has come before you, because I think it captures all of those things that you have been asking us to think about: collaboration, world-class activity, taking advantage of what we have as our own, in our own backyard, so to speak. So I urge your support of this tremendous proposal, and I want to just say thank you to all of the faculty members and administrators who put this together. It's just a tremendous effort. It's not Regent Tuss entirely unique. Other states, and there are 25 to 27 EPSCoR states in the country now, many of them have worked to put together system-wide or statewide efforts. So it's not unique in that regard, but it certainly is an exemplar in that regard, and one that, that will put us on the map in terms of collaborative research. Thank you.
Thanks, President Engstrom, and you're right. I think it is worth noting that the collaboration extends past the university system, and it starts a lot with the governor's office. They certainly committed to this project, not only with funds to help us with the matching component, but in theory have been very supportive of exactly what you just spoke of. So clearly a fantastic approach for the system, and I think Regent Teal's opinion as a student as to how exciting the innovation is speaks to the credibility of it as well. President Cruzado.
Yes. Mr. Chair, I also wanted to second what Royce has said so eloquently. And there's immense enthusiasm on both institutions with this proposal. This is truly one of those faculty-led initiatives. And people have come to the table and they have talked about resources and how to share and how to envision these projects that will benefit not only the people from Montana, but the results of the research that we're going to start with this institute will have worldwide impact. It is absolutely impressive. I second what Roy said also, because, and you need to know, Sylvia Moore did a stellar job of making sure that we put our best foot forward. And that's exactly what we have done as a state. And I feel extremely proud that that proposal carried both the names of our institutions. I also want to thank the faculty, the administrators, the Office of the Governor, the regents, and again, going back to the Commissioner's Office who have been so diligently involved in this. I also needed to say, this is exactly what we have been talking about when we say that we do recognize that the needs of the state of Montana are way too huge, that the opportunities are way too urgent for both institutions not to work together. And it's almost exemplar also, because as I remember, President Engstrom and I were actually in a meeting of the Big Sky Conference when we received the notification. We were sitting by each other and we were high-fiving. People thought that we were talking about something else. We were talking about science. We were talking about the future. We were talking about research in Montana. So we cannot be any prouder or any happier with this proposal. Thank you for your support.
Yeah, I feel a need to comment because it's kind of a really important teaching moment for us on a lot of levels. 2 years ago, Montana failed to achieve an EPSCoR grant. And I think that was the first time they had failed, and they had approached it, individually, always before. And this time they took what was for our system a markedly different approach of combining and making this approach. And, there's an old saying, if all you ever do is all you've ever done, then all you ever get's all you ever got. Well, we didn't get it last time. So they stepped back, and instead of doing the same thing twice, they rethought the whole process. They came at it in a different way, and now we have a really significant EPSCoR grant that reaches across the state and will do more to tie us together as a system, not two systems, but a system, than probably anything we've done in recent memory. And so it's really to be applauded. It's landmark because of that. The money is great, the project is great, but the fact that we found a new paradigm to approach this is what's really, really significant. And so I'm totally supportive of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Regent Barrett. Any other comments? All right. Is it the sense of this committee move forward for support tomorrow? Great. We'll do that. The mission change item B, any quick comments on that? President Cruzado, anything you want to weigh in on the mission change related to? Oh, pardon me, I missed you both, right?
Mr. Chair, over the last 20 months, we have been engaged in a comprehensive review of every aspect of our planning documents. We have been talking about the vision for the university 5 years from now, 8 years from now. We have been having very meaningful conversations about core themes, and we are in the process of elaborating our new strategic plan. As part of that, we wanted to make sure that we revisited our mission statement. And particularly, we wanted to come up with a mission statement that was succinct, one that we could almost invoke at the start of every important meeting, so that we remind ourselves, this is who we are. This is why we're here, and this is what we are intent in accomplishing. I think that this mission statement accomplishes all that. It focuses, of course, on the tripartite mission of the land-grant university that we so proudly embrace. And it also talks about the importance of integrating those elements of the tripartite mission. No longer do we think about learning and teaching and research and outreach and service as three different things, but we celebrate and we commit ourselves to making sure that we integrate the power of those three functions. So I'm very proud to submit this mission statement for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, or Regent Teal?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this item because I had a small part in crafting it, as I sat on the planning committee for the past year as a student representative. And I have been very impressed with the work of that committee, and particularly sitting in the back, Jim Rimpow, Vice President for Planning and Analysis, has done some really incredible work in moving this process forward. And I'm also very excited now that we have an incredible and exciting strategic plan on the UM campus. I'm excited for the process that you've started, President Cruzado, and to do that for Bozeman and maybe even make a little bit better one. And I'm really excited to see the outcomes of that process. I think that this is a great step for MSU.
Thank you. Other comments? Campus leaders? Please, Marvin.
This one on yet? Yeah. Just a quick comment about processes. I mean, planning and reviews go on all the time in large systems like this, and I know, I mean, the useful mission review kinds of processes that the board was involved in, the last couple of years, which we were all participating in, but every once in a while, when the same terminology is used, it's always sort of useful just to keep in mind which processes are which. And I just know during some of those discussions, faculty would once in a while say, oh, remember, mission review is one thing, and it's not this, that is how campuses rewrite their mission statements. And again, I think we all know that, but just to be reminded of that's useful. And that this process, is the process by which a university mission statement is reviewed, which then, took a long time. Everybody's fingers on campus was involved in this process in, high contact ways, and it takes a little while, but again, that level of flow through of a campus and that leads to this, I think, is why then we like the results. So.
Thanks, Professor Landsberg. Any other comments? Is it the sense of the committee to move it forward for a vote tomorrow on the action items? Looks like it. Great. And finally, in the action item, item C, resolution on transferability. Deputy Commissioner Moore, why don't you describe this real quick?
Thank you, Chairman Buchanan. Members of the board, this sprung out of the discussion that we had at the last Board of Regents meeting, where Regent Buchanan reminded people somewhat at the end of our meeting of the importance of going to the finish line with the first phase of the transfer initiative, which is the common course numbering. We are concerned. There have been some questions come from the campus, particularly as we look to maybe some personnel changes in our office surrounding this, that no one get the wrong impression that the transfer initiative is not going away. We care deeply about transfer, and I think we heard that earlier this morning. We want to have, as Associate Commissioner Trevor is fond of saying, the one-button push, that students know exactly what they can take and what will transfer, and make it as magically simple as possible. So that said, I think there's some fatigue and justifiable fatigue that's going on with this as we get into the throes of the final flocks that have to decide upon common learning outcomes and what things really can be commonly numbered. So the resolution is pretty straightforward. I don't know if we need to read it thoroughly, but it's printed up there. And I think the main thing is the bottom line is the board reaffirming its commitment to the transfer initiative and the processes that support it. We know this is a lot of work. We know the campuses have stepped up to that work, and we appreciate that. And we just need to know that it's an ongoing partnership, and we'll smile as we work on it, but we do need to keep working on it.
Thank you. Any comments? Or Regent McLean.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Moore, and thank you, Regent Buchanan, for elevating the conversation in regards to transferability at the last meeting and then again today. Since our last meeting, I've had the great opportunity of speaking with our local Delta Kappa Gamma group, which is teachers, retired and currently practicing, as well as our group of local Rotarians. And if one theme emerged from both discussions, it was about the transferability of credits. So the issue is resonating back home, and it is a theme that is important to our local community. So I thank you for bringing it to the table again.
Regent Tuss. Thank you, Regent McLean.
I just want to second that notion. As the rookie here, when folks discovered what my appointment was, this is the first thing I heard about, is transferability. And I had no idea until my wonderful orientation the Commissioner's office put on what was happening behind the curtain on this issue. So kudos to the Commissioner's office and your staff for all the work that you've done, and I'm pleased that this is on our agenda.
Thank you, Regent Tuss. Commissioner Stearns.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan. I think at a future dashboard indicator, I would like to, at that time, ask Mr. Trevor to comment, because he's headed up kind of the technical side of, in his team, of transferability and common course numbering. It's been, as you know, a huge effort, and I think some of the fatigue that Deputy Commissioner Moore spoke about is not just at the faculty level, but they're, I think, an understandable skepticism that we as a system can stick with this. And I think we need to convey through this resolution and through every means at our disposal that when this was funded in 2007, they put funds in the base for us to maintain this with faculty learning outcome councils. That's when Regent Tuss learned about flocks, because there was one meeting hard, and of faculty from all over the state on one discipline the other day, and having lunch and working through it and slogging through it and looking at their syllabus, but that it is, and then it has the technical side. So Tyler is actually, which he rarely does, volunteering to come up to speak. So I'm sort of taken aback and quite pleased, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Stearns, I thought you wanted me to.
Oh.
Otherwise, I wouldn't. I can just say this. Common course numbering is split into two phases. The first phase of the common numbering, the second phase of the maintenance, and we're moving into that maintenance. Let nobody mistake the fact that we've common numbered 8,000 courses through a process that has 10,000 some odd courses in it. We're maintaining those courses in a secure database. We're checking every semester to see which campuses have and have not implemented. We have compliance reports. We have a process set up, but we have a lot of work ahead of us. Every time a new course is created, it has to go through a check process. And I think that's sort of what Deputy Commissioner Moore is putting her foot down on the pedal here and saying, we've got to pay attention to that.
Regent Teal.
Yes, thank you, Regent Buchanan. I'm really glad that we're talking about this again, because I think that maintenance component to ensure that that this continues to work is really important, because I think that that transferability is central to our efforts to have this university system behave effectively as a system. Being able to transfer credits between institutions within the system is really important, so that we can serve students, so we can have 2-year to 4-year transferability. And I'm really glad that we're talking about it and ensuring that we're maintaining our commitment to making it work long term.
Thanks, Regent Teal. Any other comments or thoughts as it relates to this? This is one of those deliverables. We were asked to do something because it was of most important to the state, and we've done it. We're making progress, and I can hear former Regent Lila Taylor right now pounding her fist that this is the, get it done, and this resolution is our board's commitment to do that. So at this meeting, exactly right. It's the sense of our committee to move it forward tomorrow. Great. That is the action items. We're gonna try to give quite a bit of time to a couple of items on the information item. So cruise over a couple. Is anything sticking out on the level 1 memorandum to anybody as something that needs some discussion? Okay, perfect. We'll pass on that. Brandy, it sounds like you may have an update for us on American Indian Minority Achievement. Thanks, Brandy.
Good morning, and I'm happy to be here today to do my first report for the Regents on the American Indian and Minority Achievement efforts in our office. And I have a little PowerPoint to help guide the discussion, and particularly was pleased about the conversation this morning about advising, and certainly would like to emphasize that our campuses are very committed to this idea, and as I go around, I'm very excited to see. First of all, just to put it into some context and remind us that the Montana State Constitution does talk a little bit about this, as you all know. First of all, it states that it's the goal of the people to establish a system of education which will develop the full educational potential of each person, and equality of educational opportunity is guaranteed to each person of the state. Specifically, when it comes to our educational concerns about American Indians, the state recognizes the distinct and unique cultural heritage of American Indians and is committed in its educational goals to the preservation of their cultural integrity. So that provides some framework to what we do, as well as the Regents policy, which is Policy 1902, which states, to enroll and graduate American Indians and other minorities in proportion to the representation in the state's population, and it's expected that they have comparable levels of achievement with non-minority students. That's the first goal that the Regents have put forth. The second goal is to increase the employment of American Indians and other underrepresented minorities in administrative, faculty, and staff positions, and to enhance the overall curriculum by infusion of content which enhances multicultural awareness and understanding. So that's the framework with which we've been given to operate. I just took this position in August, and so I'm beginning to understand some of the history and context. And so what I will provide to you today is an overall presentation on our approach that we're going to take. So first of all, I've developed an intercampus advisory council with representatives from the campuses to help direct the system office and each other on collaboration points, connection points. We also are connecting to K-12 and continuing those connections through our campuses and through my participation in the Montana Advisory Council on Indian Education with the Board of Public Ed. We connect to the tribal colleges through AHEC, American Indian Higher Education Consortium, and other relationships, and then other stakeholders, including the Montana Indian Education Association, and tribal communities and tribal education directors. So we really have taken to heart your comments on collaboration. There's a lot of wonderful work that happens in the state, and we just want to continue to build on that. So the way in which we're doing that is looking at gaining some information to inform our strategic plan, which my goal is to have developed by the end of this academic year. We are looking at that as a three-part step. The first is to awareness, to engage in an assessment for our system, to provide some clear picture about the inequities that exist. Those are things that the campuses are currently doing, but I'm trying to coordinate and facilitate that process on a system level so we can see where our gaps are. Then, of course, interpreting that information, which means to look at analyzing and integrating the meaning of those inequities. And third, to develop the action. So here's the part where we take this information and we look at trying to achieve equity based on data and not assumptions. The goals of this process, which the details will come through our advisory council, will be having our sort of first working session probably sometime after Thanksgiving. And big picture again, we're trying to increase our capacity to interpret and share the data. That's disaggregated by race and ethnicity. And I'm sure you've heard Deputy Commissioner Trevor talk about the change in the coding for race and ethnicity and what that means to us and developing a new baseline. It also means that we want to expand our system and campus knowledge about the factors that result in those inequities for students of color, particularly in access, enrollments, retention, achievement, and graduation. So we look at the access component to make sure that we are encouraging our students to access their educational opportunities through the MUS, but also succeeding and attaining their goals. We will then do an analysis to develop equity-oriented goals and benchmarks to achieve equity for students of color in all measurable areas. And those goals, and I think this is important, are going to be connected to other initiatives through the Commissioner's Office, which includes the general education work, College Now, faculty and staff development and retention, and our approach to data gathering and analysis. I think that my goal is to really help to continue to infuse and integrate American Indian initiatives through all of the work we do in the Commissioner's Office in the campus. I don't want it to be seen as something separate and other, but it's really part of our best practices to support the Constitution as well as the Regent's policy there for access and equity of achievement for our students. Just as a couple specific things, again, I've been around to some of the campuses and have been part of the university system for 11 years, and we all know that people on our campuses want to do the right thing and are trying to do the right thing, and we need to have a more consistent and connected conversation about those, and I think that's what I hope to bring to the Regents and to the campuses. I also think that we need to make sure we continue to work with our tribal college partners and our tribal communities. I was very fortunate this fall to be on both the Bozeman campus and the Missoula campus in their efforts to connect to those tribal communities through their Council of Elders and a meeting with the tribal college presidents. So these are wonderful things that are happening, and we'll report on these to you. Typically at this meeting in November, we do present our diversity report, and we decided to pull back on that this time because we want that information to be tied into the strategic plan that we're developing, as well as make it meaningful for you as regents and to the campuses, so that we can make sure that we're focusing on what it is that we're trying to accomplish and allow for the uniqueness of the campuses and their regional concerns, but also to sort of connect those dots and show what we're doing as the system of higher education. Thank you.
Brandy. Comments or thoughts as it relates to that presentation? Regent Robinson.
Mr. Chair, thank you. One thing, last week I had a chance to get around the state a little bit more, and I had a chance to come to the campus at MSU and also the campus at University of Montana, and to meet with some of the, besides the president, some of the other departments. And some of the conversations that I had, it was great, again, to see the efforts that were being made to not just invite that partnership with the tribal colleges, but also to reach out and actually go to those campuses. And I want to thank President Cruzado and President Engstrom as well for making those efforts, because it is that true, authentic collaboration, I think, that we're looking for. And it'll take us even further. I would also, and I had suggested to both presidents too, is we also need to collaborate within ourselves as well to make it most effective, I think, because I just want to remind ourselves that just as is each of the campuses are extremely complicated and have a lot of moving parts, the same with tribal colleges and their leadership. And so if they're committed to come and participate in these discussions, there really has to be something tangible there for them to work with. And so to have to attend 4 different sessions of these type of discussions is probably not the most effective use of their time. So I would hope that those type of discussions are coming together to really make it an effective process and partnership.
Absolutely. Commissioner Robinson, that is one of the strategies and priorities that we're looking at, is making sure, as we all know on campuses, resources are at a premium. This is true of our tribal college partners, and we want to be sure that we're respectful of what they're trying to do and can work and connect and collaborate together. So we absolutely will take that and move forward with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Regent Robinson. Any other comments? Great report, Brandy. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Regent McLean.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan, and thank you for the great report and the great work that you're doing and that you're about to do. It's a tremendous undertaking, and I think that it's going to benefit student populations, both in K-12 as well as post-secondary. As you speak to the data, specifically in regards to K-12, something interesting came up just a couple of weeks ago. We were working, my principal and I, on our continuous school improvement plan that we put into the Office of Public Instruction database. And one of the things that I took note of was in so many of the questions, they specifically wanted to know how we addressed Indian Ed for All. They also spoke to teaching our most at-risk students on both ends of the spectrum. And as we look to data, I wondered what type of a reference point that OPI CSIP database might provide as we look to whether those schools met the mark regarding graduation rates, counseling, any interventions that they are doing, and then getting those students into the post-secondary pipeline. And then one other thing that it seems that K-12 is trying to do, and the Office of Public Instruction is doing, I think, a very good job of raising awareness of it, is the importance of, I think, embedding the Indian Ed for All component in every lesson that we teach, rather than sometimes, I think educators, maybe it's at the K-12 as well as post-secondary level, do it as a set-aside, and they might do a craft with a math lesson or something. And I think that we're taking a good look at how we can, as faculty and staff, K-12 and post-secondary, how we can embed those components every single day in every lesson that we teach. And I look forward to hearing more about the data that you find, and I wish you the best as you move forward and offer any support that I can offer at this table. It's very important work. Thank you,
Commissioner McLean. I would also like to respond that the data from OPI does show that the increase in students at a K-12 level will be from the American Indian population. And as we see the majority population go down, our American Indian population in K-12 will go up, which means that we have a, almost a selfish vested interest in making sure that we're cultivating the future of higher education here. So I do look at that data. We do work with OPI quite closely. Commissioner Moore, or Deputy Commissioner Moore, will talk a little bit about Gear Up and how we're connecting to the schools on or near reservations for that. I also, the Indian Ed for All, that is something that higher ed also has a responsibility for, and we are working through those conversations. In our teacher ed programs, I think we do a very good job of communicating to our pre-service teachers the expectations. We really need to look at infusing that through other disciplines. And I recently attended a training at the Bozeman campus that their College of Education put on, and there were faculty from biochemistry, from math, all cross disciplines, and I thought that was very exciting that voluntarily they were interested in not only understanding learning styles and different cultural approaches to learning, but how do we connect our information to an application and to sort of capitalize on the rich knowledge that we have here in our tribal communities. And I think that we will work on that very intentionally over the next however many years we have.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy, very much. For the sake of time, we're going to tackle the next two items before we break for lunch with the meeting with the students. So, Tyler, if you'd start heading up, we'll ask Deputy Commissioner Moore to give us a quick update on Gear Up, and then we'll jump into the Affordability Task Force item.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan. Gear Up, for the acronym challenged, is gaining early awareness and readiness for university programs. One day after our last meeting, absolutely on Friday, we got word that the Gear Up renewal had been awarded to the state of Montana, $28 million over 7 years, not loose change. Huge partnership with K-12. It does target 18 schools in high-risk areas, schools that really could use some help. Sandy Merdinger, our program director, has worked very closely with the Office of Public Instruction. They will be funding the ACT with writing and working with the OPI partners to make sure we get that spread across the state. So that's the good news. Gear Up is refunded for $28 million for 7 years. There's a little bit of less good news, and that is that Sandy Merdinger has announced her intent to retire at the end of December. So that's going to be a huge void, and we respect her decision to do that, but we are now going to be looking for a new director. So let this be the first public announcement that we've got another job open that I'm going to be looking for some really enthusiastic person to fill who has some experience in big grant management and experience in working with our K-12 partners. So the good news and the little bit less good news with Gear Up. And any questions, I'll give them to my OPI partner. No, just kidding, Steve.
Congratulations to everybody involved in that. Deputy Commissioner Trevor, affordability. I know you guys have been hard at work. Let's hear what you got.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, what we have for you today is a very brief update on the Affordability Task Force that you're all familiar with, that we formed. We've been talking about affordability data, tuition, relationship with financial aid, and family resources. We put together the Affordability Task Force made up of experts around the system, financial aid directors, student services folks, students, a faculty member. We've met once. In fact, Regent Buchanan attended the meeting as well. It's one of the most engaging topics, at least from my point of view. And what we want to do for you to hear today is just show you one piece of data, have some of the experts from that task force sit as a panel to kind of engage you in a discussion of this topic, setting the stage for what our primary purpose is to use data to recommend strategies to you to create a more affordable system of higher education. So with I just mentioned, oh, I'll forget that. Here's the one slide. And what I would say about this slide is, if you want to talk about affordability and the issue of affordability in Montana, there is not one more important slide that I have showed you throughout the series of presentations than this slide. And so let me take just a second here to dissect this. The dark blue bar, the total there, is information from the last presentation I gave you. What we're looking at here are the total number of four-year degree recipients in 2010. There was about 4,700 of them. 62% came out with, or 63% came out with loans. That's higher than the national average of 55%. So we have more students lending. The average amount that those students borrowed was close to $23,000. That's $3,000 higher than the national average. And so that's what we established last time.
Does that include the folks that did not take loans out? I mean, if you say we delivered 4,700 degrees, is it the average?
No, the averages of just those who took loans.
Okay, thank you.
So then what we do from there, we take that total and we move over to the next bar. We split the total out between those students who received Pell Grants and those who did not receive Pell Grants. So the middle shorter blue bar there is the non-Pell students. And there's about 2,600 of the 4,700 that received degrees that are non-Pell students. 42% of that 2,600 took out loans for an average amount of $18,000. And moving over to the next bar, which are students that are Pell students, our low-income students. There's about 2,000 of them. They make up about 40% of our graduating class. 90% took out loans. Almost, you could almost say if you received a Pell Grant, you will take out a loan. And the average amount is $26,000. So just think of that. If you are a low-income student, you will take out a loan. You can almost say as a fact, and their average amount will be $7,000 over the national average, and what, $8,000 over what your counterpart who is a non-Pell student. So if you want to focus on the affordability issue, it's right there. It's in that Pell column. It's a lot of students, it's a high percent, and they're taking out a lot of loans. And so what we see this playing out with Pell Grants is we rely upon the federal government to fix this problem for us through Pell. That's basically what we do, is we say, okay, Pell, you get $5,500. That'll cover your cost of an education. When the cost of an education is $15,000 a year, so that's how you end up with that amount of loans. So that basically sets the stage for us to talk about strategies. We have campus experts here that can give perspectives of ways they've handled it on their campus and some of the discussion that we've had in the group.
Thanks, Tyler. Real quick, I want to be clear on this. When we hear what is the national average right now for loan?
Well, it's about 19,800.
Is the better way to interpret that data of those that borrow?
Yep.
So it does not include, because I've been misinterpreting that. So every time we compare and we say 25,000 is the average, but only for those that do borrow.
Yeah, and it's that extra average loan amount of students who borrowed. It's right underneath the title there, and does not include Parent Plus loans.
Perfect. Thank you.
But remember, with that Pell group, it's 90% borrowed for an average of 26,000. So it's almost everybody. If you threw everybody in there, it might go down to like 24,000.
Mr. Chairman and Tyler, I think probably you're kicking this over to the panel, but we kick this around a lot in our office. And I guess one of the themes that should have made it into my listening session themes was, what are you doing about financial assistance and graduation rates, the connection and, for students and need-based aid? So this one slide, as Tyler said, has occupied us, and what does it mean? Clearly, one of the things it means is that any student who needs a Pell Grant, frankly, also needs money to live on. That's what it amounts to. And to do that, they borrow, understandably. And so 90% of them, that is how it's paying for everything.
And I'd kick this over
But let's kick it over to
my counterparts. But as I kick it over, I will say this affects performance. Graduation rates for Pell students, 31%. Graduation rate for non-Pell students, 47%. Shockingly different.
You recall that when we talked about this the last time, we pointed out the fact that the debt, not only is the average debt per student higher, but the debt to completion ratio is extremely high. But you'll also recall that when we look at Montana and compare to other states, one of the things two things that really stick out and I think directly relate to what you're looking at right now. One is that the need-based aid available to Montana students is very, very low compared to WICHE states, compared to national averages, any way you want to look at it. And so again, as Tyler said, basically what we're doing is we're depending on Pell to meet the gap. And the other thing is that, unfortunately, we have a very high percentage of our students who are Pell eligible compared to other states. So it's not surprising. It is a direct result of these factors that what we see in terms of the amount of debt that students are graduating with.
Yeah, Bill mentioned that our state-based need aid is very low, and we didn't just get here in a year or two. It's been low for a long, long time, and you can look at those trends. And when you do look at that and you recognize our state's incomes are usually in the bottom quartile of the country, you can see what a challenge that is. And so I think one of the things that we've been talking about as a task force is we've kind of got to figure out how to solve this ourselves. Simply hoping that the state will come forward with the solution and do better just isn't going to work. It's been this way a long time. So this is something that I think as a task force we're sort of challenged to figure out some ideas for dealing with this, and you know, we need to just take this bull by the horns. Tyler's numbers on the graduation rates are really compelling. These students are struggling. So.
I guess my input would be that I think that we were charged with a task last May and talking about alternatives and talking about creativity and talking about funding and accessibility. And I think when we look at the federal scope as a super committee is meeting and Pell Grants are on the table, when we look at some legislative sessions that continually, last night the students talk about in 1996, our education was funded at a state level at 74%. Now we're hovering at about 35, 36%. So not only are we talking about a federal level, but we're also looking at a state level, and I think that the question then comes, how do we as a system respond? How do we maintain higher education in an accessibility? And I think that this board is looking at some really great alternatives. I think that we're trying to funnel some resources into two-year education. I think we're trying to incentivize and prioritize two-year education and transfer those students. But I would also say that we need to look at some creative solutions. A Pell Grant in that same scope used to pay, I think it was 75% of your education, and now it pays below 30%. And those are evidenced even in Montana, so that's a national trend. When we do look at the students that have a minimal access to wealth, we're looking at that saying we have a minimal access to higher education. It is the one state agency that we expect our recipients to pay for. So this information as a student comes to me saying we are actually expecting some of our lower income students across the state to bear more burden of that cost. And those are students that take out Pell Grants, either their family doesn't have access, or maybe they themselves, outside of the scope of the responsibility of, I think at 26 you become independent, and I know that when we look at our enrollment rates, our high school grad, freshmen and down, but some of those non-trads are popping up. I think this is something that our system needs to look at, and how do we as a system, and how do we shift? We know that the state's probably not going to match us in state-based aid. We know that. So how do we mitigate for that? And I guess as a student, I would encourage us to look at some of those solutions.
Has the task force looked at what solutions might be out there, or what other states are doing, or what are those outside-the-box things that perhaps we should be considering at this table to assist with this effort?
Well, a couple things. One is, as we've said, other states provide more need-based aid at a state level. We really rank very poorly in that regard. But where those things fall short, I think what's potentially in our control, one of the things we said in the last discussion was if we're trying to really manage affordability and manage student debt, and the variable the knob that we have our hand on is tuition, then we're probably trying to manage the wrong variable. Because as what we've seen is that while this board and public policymakers in Montana have done an admirable job in recent years at holding tuition down, that's not helping us with this problem. And so I guess to be very blunt about it, what we believe the solution is that the system, the campuses are going to have to probably address the need-based aid issue ourselves. And we're probably going to need to do that through tuition. As counterintuitive as that may seem.
I would add, too, that as you look at the mission of this task force, I think we're in stage 2 of the process, which is pretty much to this point trying to identify what is it that we're trying to address. And stage 3 then is discovery and implementation of any possible solutions. And so that is certainly a focus that will be on the plate of these folks next. It's a great question, Paul. Regent Robinson.
Mr. Chairman, this is really good information. Again, thank you again. As always, it's good to see the compilation and how the numbers kind of come out. With something like this, what I'm always curious about too, and you may not know, and maybe this is part of what the task force can do, is looking especially at the Pell category, but it applies to non-Pell as well, is the why. What's also behind that? Are we looking at what type of information do we have about those particular students that have elected to get Pell Grants, and even those that haven't, and their type of, I know it's kind of a little bit proprietary information, but still, and I'm going to jump out on a limb here, but looking at the alternatives, I think that it certainly wouldn't hurt to have some financial education, which I know is being taught at a younger and younger age, about the consequences and what do you really need and how do you budget and all of these sort of things. And I mention that because recently I had a chance to visit with some folks at the HRDC Human Resource Development Council in Billings, who also provide some student assistance there as well. And it sounds like they're going untapped, that they're not able to utilize their funds in order to get the applicants to come in. Part of it, I think, is a requirement that they set up an IDA account and take that financial training, literacy. And so, but I think that there's still some connections that aren't quite being made, and it would be good to identify where we're not maximizing our resources that we do have, and also look at exactly the type of borrowers that we're talking about, because I think there's some opportunities to work with them. Maybe that we were talking here just recently about, starting with freshmen and having that advising going on. Maybe that's, and I'm not going to assume that that isn't happening, but it sounds like that could be something that it's included in that advising to really kind of counsel and walk them through.
I would add too, we were discussing this at the last meeting a little bit, this financial literacy component. We've got so many efforts right now where we're interacting with people pre-decision making for college, whether it's college savings plan efforts, our writing assessment, all these opportunities where we've developed rapport and developed the relationships with those potentially college-bound students that we want to capture. And you're exactly right. I mean, the big financial literacy opportunity that we have, a lot of the groundwork is laid, and I'm really looking forward to how we integrate this message in a way that is compelling enough that parents and students, as early as, I don't even know when to peg, but as early as we possibly can, start to grapple with the responsibilities associated with the pursuit of higher education. And you're absolutely right to that. And I know that there's a lot of discussion at this point is trying to capture a message, and how do we export that message to the right people at the right time, the earliest time possible. Great comments. President Cruzado.
Yes, Regent Buchanan, I would like to ask Bill, I would like for you to elaborate on your last comment, because I'm still thinking about it, when you said that the answer might be to use additional aid-based tools and continue using tuition, as counterintuitive as that might sound. So that I make sure that I understand you, what you're saying is perhaps we move into a model of a higher tuition, higher financial aid?
Correct. Correct. And Jim and I were talking about this out in the hall earlier. I mean, frankly, what public institutions, what we in Montana, because frankly we were unfortunately at the front of the curve on this in terms of the decline of effective state support. And so basically this privatization that we've been talking about that's been going on for the past 10, 15, 20 years in public higher education. And so therefore we've become, really the solutions are very much following the things that the privates have been doing for a long time. And one of the things that you'll see the private model is, yeah, you raise the tuition because you're going to have the revenue. But you do that, and part of what you do is you dedicate a portion of that increased revenue to providing the need-based aid to those who frankly couldn't afford it otherwise. And the thing, I guess the other comment, I think the comment about the financial literacy is right on. And it's something that our campus and others, I think, in the system are really starting to work very hard on. Same thing, same time, remember this, and Tyler has another slide, I think, I don't know if it's in there or not, but that shows the age distribution of the borrowers. And one of the things to keep in mind is these are not necessarily 18, 19-year-olds who just graduated from high school last year. These are not necessarily dependent students. And so, again, the need is often very real. Now, we need to make sure that the students, the borrowers understand, and again, we have evidence, both anecdotal as well as data, to indicate that a lot of times people are not making the best choice for their own well-being. But at the same time, the need is very real, and we're going to have to address the need. If you look at the difference between the 18 to 24 rate of borrowing versus the older students, I mean, that's incredible.
Yep, sorry, Madam Commissioner, please.
I know we're pushing the noon hour, but I think we just absolutely have to give a shout out to a fairly recent, in the last few years, need-based aid program was the Governor's Best and Brightest program, and I don't think we can talk about this without mentioning that that was established, and all kudos and appreciation for that. But what this also shows is that even with that, there's just a lot more work to be done. And the Tom Mortensen and the Pell Institute nationally has, as we read their materials, and it's just credible, very credible long-term data and research. The other day, Mr. Trevor and I were looking at Montana identified in, frankly, the lower 10 states in terms of figuring out policies, innovative policies to address need-based aid. And the phrase was used that something to the effect of uncertainty as to whether these states were a little bit negligent or just really hadn't come out of their old sort of low tuition, low aid, century-long model, or were they actually antagonistic or even hostile to poor kids, to poor people. I mean, it was striking. I mean, you go to work every day and there's almost always, for all of us, kind of moments that you think about when you get home after dinner that night. And that was a phrase that was haunting us the last few weeks. Are we just a little bit negligent, or in our negligence even almost hostile to students who no longer can work in the summer and make enough for that cost of living that's between the low tuition, relatively low tuition, and the low aid? We're not doing it. So all kudos to you, Mr. Chairman. We intend, with your direction, to keep up this work.
Regent Barrett, please.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a critical, important talk, but I think we have to really think hard about how we approach this. This is not a problem that we're going to solve with dollars. We cannot solve it with dollars. Whether our state's negligent or not is irrelevant. Our state is what our state is. Its average incomes are what they are, and the tax revenues are what they are. And as we say in many other contexts, our pie isn't going to get any bigger. And if the pie goes to solve this problem, some other problem goes unresolved. Where I think we need to address our efforts is in the combination of financial literacy and counseling, whatever it is, to increase the graduation rates of those Pell and other students. It's not the loan that's the problem. I'm not bothered by a college graduate who has $25,000 loan average. A college graduate will think nothing and go out and signing a loan for a used Chevrolet that costs $25,000. If they're graduating, it's when they're not graduating that's the issue. And I think the much more cost-effective approaches are looking at ways to increase that retention and graduation. Now, we have to do the other things, but we will not solve this with money. And there's I think, and maybe it's just my read of what I hear, of finding ways to get more aid, more this and more that. And the problem is much more systemic of that. It's not enough aid. It's that they're too stressed and they're not able to graduate. And if we try to solve that problem with more intervention, more contact, all the other things, we'll do much more than if we find another 10% for more aid.
If I could just respond to that, Regent Barrett. I think as a student, I think the topic that you bring up is not falling on deaf ears. We have to talk about affordability and accessibility outside of the silo of just dollar signs. We have to talk about two-year education. We have to talk about financial literacy. We have to talk about student success initiatives. We have to talk about graduation rates. And while I haven't necessarily gone out and bought a used Chevrolet yet, I don't know what my accessibility is in the current job market, but I do think that as much tutoring, as much student retention activities that we can implement, we cannot make an affordability discussion outside of those conversations. And so I think that one of the reasons, and that's why I opened with, there are some really great initiatives that are coming forth and really great discussions coming forth from this board, but we have to interlace those conversations with affordability. They are not silos, and they all interconnect.
That's right. Yeah, great discussion. Clearly not the easiest information to tackle, but certainly the first step is understanding it and digging into it a little bit deeper. So thank you very much to the members of the task force for putting so much work into it. Visiting with the chairman here, we've decided that we're going to recess for lunch and reconvene this committee after lunch to wrap up the business that we've yet to get to. So with that, Mr. Chairman, back at you.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan. We'll break for lunch. The board members, as soon as we can get there, we're late already. We have lunch with the students in D, which I think is where we had breakfast. And then we'll be back here at,
Board members, we have a picture.
we have a picture, but I'm hopeful it doesn't take us a half hour to take our picture. So we'll try to be back here at 1:30 and start definitely on time with the remainder of academic committee, and then we'll move on to the agenda from there.